Bought by the Billionaire. Prologue: The Debt Collector. The November rain had turned the Brooklyn brownstone's front steps into a slick, treacherous descent. Fitting, Elena thought, for a funeral that felt more like an ending than a goodbye. Inside, her father's colleagues from the Transit Authority balanced paper plates of deli sandwiches and spoke in hushed tones about pension plans and overtime shifts, as if Frank Morgan had been the kind of man who died with his affairs in order. He hadn't. Elena stood at the kitchen sink, scrubbing coffee rings from borrowed mugs while her sister Mia played hostess in the living room. Through the doorway, she could see Mia's bright smile. Too bright, the kind that cracked at the edges, as she accepted condolences from their father's union rep, 22 years old, and already an expert at performing gratitude for strangers who'd never once asked why Frank Morgan had missed so many shifts in his final year, or where the money had gone. Elena knew where it had gone. She'd spent 3 weeks after his heart attack tracing the breadcrumbs. The maxed credit cards, the second mortgage on the brownstone, the cash advances that had funded late nights at underground poker rooms in Chinatown. Her father had been a good man once, before her mother's cancer had hollowed him out and left something desperate in its place. The debts he'd accumulated trying to win back what he'd lost, first money, then dignity, then hope, now belonged to Elena. $43,000 to credit card companies. $60,000 on the second mortgage. And the other debt, the one that had arrived in her mailbox on embossed cardstock 3 days after the funeral. $340,000 to Cross Holdings LLC. Payment due in full within 30 days. No payment plan options. No negotiation terms. Just an address in Midtown and a phone number she'd been too afraid to call. The knock at the back door made her drop the mug she'd been drying. It shattered against the tile, white porcelain scattering like teeth, and she stared at the pieces, her heart suddenly loud in her ears. Nobody used the back door. It opened onto a narrow alley shared with a neighboring brownstone, accessible only through a locked gate her father had installed when she and Mia were children. She'd checked that lock herself this morning. The knock came again. 3 measured raps that somehow conveyed both patience and inevitability. Elena's hand found the chef's knife in the drying rack. She crossed the kitchen, her funeral dress, simple black sheath, her mother's pearls, whispering against her thighs. Through the door's frosted glass panel, she could make out a tall silhouette, broad-shouldered, still as a photograph. Ms. Morgan. The voice was male, low, with a kind of polish that came from expensive schools and boardrooms where men decided the fates of smaller men. I'm here about your father's account. Her fingers tightened on the knife handle. We're sitting Shiva. Come back tomorrow. Your family is Catholic. And I don't make appointments twice. Something in his tone, not threat exactly but certainty, made her unlock the door. The man on her back stoop was younger than she'd expected, mid-30s, with a kind of face that belonged on magazine covers or museum sculptures. Sharp jaw, slate-gray eyes, dark hair cut with military precision. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent, and his shoes, Italian leather she noted absurdly, were barely damp despite the rain. What struck her most was his stillness. He didn't fidget or shift his weight. He simply existed in her doorway like a piece of architecture, immovable and deliberate. Damien Cross. He didn't offer his hand. His gaze dropped to the knife she'd forgotten she was holding, and one corner of his mouth lifted. Not quite a smile. You won't need that. I'll decide what I need. But she lowered the blade, stepping back to let him enter. Better to have this conversation away from Mia's ears. He moved into her kitchen with the ease of someone accustomed to occupying space without permission. His presence seemed to shrink the room, or maybe it was just that Elena suddenly felt every worn edge of her childhood home. The peeling linoleum, the cabinet door that hung crooked, the water stain on the ceiling from last winter's pipe burst. Through his eyes she saw poverty. Through hers, she saw evidence of every dollar her father had gambled away instead of spending on repairs. Cross's gaze traveled the room with clinical assessment, pausing on the mass card propped against the sugar bowl, the casserole dishes stacked on the counter with sympathy notes still attached. When he looked at her again, something flickered in his expression, there and gone too quickly to name. "I'm sorry for your loss," he said, and it sounded like a line he'd delivered before. Practiced. Perfunctory. "Are you?" Elena set the knife on the counter, keeping it within reach. "You're here to collect on a dead man's debts at his funeral. Forgive me if I question your sympathy. I'm here to offer you a solution." He reached inside his jacket, she tensed, and withdrew a manila folder. "Your father owed my family a considerable sum. 340,000, plus interest accruing at 8% monthly." The number hit her like a fist. She'd seen it on paper, but hearing it aloud, in this kitchen where her father had taught her to make Sunday pancakes, made it obscene. "He borrowed from a loan shark." Her voice came out steady. "Small victory." "He borrowed from my family's private lending division." Cross set the folder on the kitchen table. His movements precise. The terms were clear. He signed documentation acknowledging the interest rate and repayment schedule. He missed his last 4 payments. He was dying. "Yes." No inflection. "Which is why I'm here instead of my collectors." The distinction felt important, though Elena couldn't parse why. She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the kitchen's warmth. "I don't have that kind of money. I'm a curator at a non-profit gallery. My salary is 42,000 annually." He said it without consulting notes. "You have 1,700 in checking, 4,000 in savings. Your sister's college fund, which your father didn't touch, contains 63,000. The brownstone is worth approximately 400,000 with the outstanding mortgage. You have assets, just not liquid ones." The casual recitation of her financial life, facts he shouldn't know, numbers she'd barely calculated herself, sent ice down her spine. "You investigated me. I investigate everyone who owes my family money." He pulled out a chair, sat without invitation. The movement was fluid, controlled. "Sit down, Ms. Morgan. This is my house. For now." The words hung between them like a blade. Elena remained standing for another moment, defiance or stupidity she wasn't sure, then sank into the chair opposite him. Up close she could smell his cologne, cedar and something darker, almost metallic. Gunpowder maybe. It didn't suit the expensive suit. Cross opened the folder, slid a document across the table. The header read "Marriage Contract" in serif font. Elena's laugh came out sharp, disbelieving. "You're joking." "I don't joke about business." He withdrew a pen from his jacket, set it beside the contract. 1 year of marriage. "You'll live in my penthouse, attend social functions as my wife, and maintain the appearance of a legitimate relationship. In exchange, your father's debt is forgiven, your sister's college fund remains untouched, and you keep the brownstone. You want to buy a wife." The words tasted bitter. "I want to secure an asset." His gaze was steady, unreadable. "My family has expectations regarding my personal life. A wife provides certain advantages in my business dealings. You need money and protection from my family's collection methods. It's a mutually beneficial arrangement. Protection from your own family." Something shifted in his expression, a shadow crossing his features. "Yes." Elena stared at the contract. The text swam before her eyes. Asterisk term of agreement, 365 days. Consummation. Not required. Termination clause. Breach of confidentiality will result in immediate forfeiture. Asterisk. What happens if I refuse? Cross leaned back in his chair. The movement was casual, but his eyes held hers with uncomfortable intensity. My family's standard collection process begins with asset seizure. The brownstone would be foreclosed within 60 days. Your sister would lose her college fund to cover additional fees. After that. He paused, and for the first time she heard something almost human in his voice. Almost regretful. My father's methods become less civilized. You're threatening me. I'm explaining consequences. He tilted his head slightly, studying her. "You have a choice, Ms. Morgan. It's just not a good one." Through the kitchen doorway, Elena could hear Mia laughing at something the union rep had said. A bright, genuine sound that belonged to a girl who still believed the world was fundamentally safe. A girl who deserved to finish her degree at Columbia without knowing their father had sold her future to men who collected debts with threats and violence. Elena's hands shook as she reached for the pen. "There are rules," Cross said quietly. "You'll live in my penthouse but maintain your own bedroom. We'll appear together at business functions and family events. You don't discuss my work with anyone. You don't enter my private study. You don't ask questions about where I go or what I do." His voice dropped lower. "And you don't try to leave before the year ends. Or what? Or the contract is void, and we're back to standard collection." She should call a lawyer. She should scream for help. She should do anything except what she was doing. Flipping through pages of legalese that reduced her life to clauses and subclauses, her autonomy to a signature line. But lawyers cost money she didn't have, and the men in her living room eating grocery store cookies couldn't protect Mia from whatever less civilized methods meant. Elena had been protecting her sister since their mother died. She knew how to swallow pride, how to sacrifice comfort, how to make impossible choices look easy. This was just another impossible choice. She signed on page 12. Her signature a jagged scrawl that looked nothing like her careful museum documentation hand. Cross countersigned below hers. His penmanship elegant and controlled, then collected the pages with efficient movements. "The wedding is Saturday," he said, standing. "City Hall, 11 a.m. Bring identification and your mother's pearls." He nodded toward her necklace. "They photograph well." Elena rose on unsteady legs. "You've planned this." "I plan everything, Ms. Morgan." He moved toward the back door, then paused, looking back at her. In the kitchen's warm light, his features seemed carved from marble, beautiful and cold and utterly remote. "A car will collect you at 10:30. Don't be late to your own funeral." The door closed behind him with a soft click. Elena stood alone in her childhood kitchen, the scent of cedar and gunpowder still lingering in the air, and realized her hands had finally stopped shaking. In the living room, Mia called her name, asking if she wanted coffee. Elena touched her mother's pearls, felt their cool weight against her throat, and wondered what her mother would say about the choice she'd just made. Then she picked up the shattered pieces of porcelain from the floor, careful not to cut herself on the edges, and went to smile at the mourners who'd come to honor a man who'd died owing pieces of his daughter's souls to strangers. The ink on the contract was still wet in Cross's folder. In 6 days, she'd stand beside him in City Hall and promise forever to a man whose eyes held winter. She'd worn black to her father's funeral. She supposed she'd wear it to her wedding too. Chapter 1, The Ceremony. The City Hall wedding chapel smelled like lemon disinfectant and broken promises. Elena sat on a wooden bench outside the clerk's office, her mother's vintage dress, cream silk with a tea-length hem, pulled from the back of her closet that morning, feeling like a costume. Around her, other couples waited their turn. A pair of 20-somethings in jeans who couldn't stop touching each other, an older couple holding hands with the ease of people renewing vows, a nervous man checking his phone every 30 seconds while his fiancée pretended not to notice. None of them had arrived in a black town car driven by a man who'd introduced himself simply as Mr. Cross's associate, before lapsing into silence for the entire ride from Brooklyn. Elena checked her watch. 10:57. Damien Cross was late to his own wedding. She twisted her mother's pearls between her fingers, the familiar weight grounding her. Mia had noticed them this morning at breakfast, had smiled and said something about Mom being there in spirit. Elena had swallowed coffee that tasted like guilt and lied about meeting a donor, about being back by dinner, about everything except the fact that she was trading herself for her sister's future. The lies were getting easier. That should have worried her more than it did. "Ms. Morgan." She looked up. Cross stood in the hallway, and for a disorienting moment, she forgot how to breathe. He wore a navy brioni suit. She recognized the cut from gallery openings where she'd served champagne to men who wore their wealth like armor, and his dark hair was slightly damp, as if he'd showered minutes ago. The November light from the tall windows turned his eyes pewter. He looked like every dangerous fantasy she'd never let herself have. "You came," she said, then felt immediately stupid. Course he'd come. This was a business transaction. He'd probably never missed a closing in his life. "Did you think I wouldn't?" He moved closer, and she caught that scent again. Cedar and gunpowder, expensive and wrong. His gaze traveled over her dress, paused on the pearls. Something flickered in his expression. "You look like a bride." The word came out sharper than intended. "Acceptable." He glanced at his watch. Patek Philippe, she noted, probably worth more than her father's debt. "The clerk is ready." No compliment, no reassurance. Just the same clinical efficiency he'd brought to her kitchen 6 days ago. Elena stood, smoothing her dress with hands that wanted to shake. "Is anyone else coming? Your family or—" "No." The word was flat, final. "My lawyer will serve as witness." "That's sufficient." She thought of Mia, who'd hugged her extra tight this morning. Of the empty brownstone where her father's absence still echoed in every room. Of the traditional wedding she'd imagined as a girl. St. Augustine's church filled with flowers, her father walking her down the aisle, a groom who looked at her like she was something precious instead of acquired. "Ms. Morgan." Cross's voice pulled her back. "We have a schedule." But because even her wedding was just another appointment in his calendar. The ceremony room was smaller than she'd expected, with industrial carpet and fluorescent lights that leached the warmth from everything. A middle-aged clerk in a cardigan stood behind a podium, looking bored. Cross's lawyer, a silver-haired man introduced as Richard Chen, waited near the window, briefcase in hand like he had somewhere better to be. Probably he did. Probably they all did. Elena took her place beside Cross in front of the podium. He stood with military posture, hands at his sides, not touching her. The space between them felt vast despite the room's close quarters. The clerk began reading from a laminated card. Her voice a monotone drone about love and commitment and cherishing. The words washed over Elena like white noise. She focused instead on breathing, on not running, on the way Cross's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly when the clerk said, "For better or worse." "Do you, Damien Alexander Cross, take this woman?" "I do." He didn't wait for the full question. His voice was steady, businesslike. A man signing a contract. The clerk blinked, then turned to Elena. "And do you, Elena Rose Morgan, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold?" Elena's throat closed. Through the window behind Chen, she could see the Manhattan skyline, all glass and steel and infinite possibility. Somewhere in one of those towers, Mia was sitting in her sociology lecture, safe and ignorant and free. "I do." The words came out barely a whisper, but they were enough. The clerk smiled her professional smile and pronounced them married. And just like that, Elena Morgan became Elena Cross. A name that tasted like copper on her tongue. "You may kiss the bride." Cross turned to her, and for a moment, just a breath, something almost human crossed his features. Then it was gone, replaced by that marble mask. He leaned in, and Elena's heart kicked against her ribs and he pressed his lips to her forehead. Controlled. Over in 2 seconds. "Congratulations," the clerk said, already reaching for the next couple's paperwork. Chen produced documents from his briefcase with practiced efficiency. Elena signed where he indicated her new signature. Asterisk Elena Cross asterisk, looking like a stranger's handwriting. Cross signed without reading. His pen strokes confident and quick. "Your copies." Chen handed her a folder. "The penthouse keys, building access codes, and credit cards are inside. Mr. Cross has already arranged for your belongings to be moved from Brooklyn this afternoon." Elena stared at him. "Moved? I didn't agree to." "It's in the contract." Cross pocketed his own folder. Section 7, subsection 3. "You'll reside at the Tribeca property for the duration of our marriage." "I didn't think you meant immediately." His gaze was steady, unreadable. I don't see the point in delay. Of course he didn't. Why waste time on transitions or adjustments when you could simply rearrange someone's entire life with the efficiency of moving chess pieces? Chan excused himself with a nod, already on his phone before he reached the door. The clerk had moved on to the next couple, the young ones in jeans, who were kissing like the world was ending. Elena watched them, something bitter and bright lodging in her chest. The car is waiting. Cross's hand appeared at the small of her back, not quite touching, just hovering there like a suggestion, or a command. She pulled away, immediately regretting the childishness of the gesture. But his touch, even anticipated, felt like a brand. I need a minute. We don't have 1 minute. She met his eyes, saw surprise flicker there. Apparently no one told Damien Cross to wait. Please. He stepped back, hands sliding into his pockets. 1 minute. Elena walked to the window, pressing her palm against the cool glass. Below, the city churned with its usual chaos. Taxis honking, pedestrians dodging puddles, food carts sending up steam that disappeared into the gray sky. Normal people living normal lives, unaware that 20 floors above them, a woman had just signed away her freedom. Well, that wasn't fair. She'd made a choice. Terrible choice maybe, but hers. Time's up. Cross's voice came from directly behind her. She hadn't heard him move. Elena turned, and the proximity stole her breath. He was close enough that she could see the faint scar bisecting his left eyebrow, the way his pupils had dilated slightly in the dim light. Close enough to kiss if this were a real marriage. If he were a real husband. What happens now? She asked. Now you come home. As if his penthouse could ever be that. As if anywhere with him could feel like safety instead of captivity. But she nodded, because what else was there to do? The contract was signed. The vows were spoken. She was Mrs. Damien Cross, at least on paper, at least for the next 359 days. He handed her something, a black credit card with her new name embossed in silver. No limit. Buy whatever you need. I don't want your money. You married me for my money. He said it without inflection, just stating facts. Take the card. She took it because arguing seemed pointless, because everything seemed pointless suddenly. The card was warm from his pocket, and she hated that she noticed. The town car was idling outside, the same silent driver holding the door. Cross gestured for her to enter first, a gentleman's habit that felt wrong coming from him. Elena slid across the leather seat, and he followed, maintaining that careful distance between them. As the car pulled into traffic, Elena watched Brooklyn disappear behind them, the brownstone and her sister and everything familiar receding like a dream. Ahead, Manhattan rose up in all its glittering indifference. The penthouse has 4 bedrooms, Cross said, his gaze fixed on his phone. You'll take the one on the east side. It has the best light. How considerate. He glanced up and she saw a flash of something, amusement, annoyance. Before his expression smoothed. I'm not a monster, Ms. Morgan. It's Mrs. Cross now. She didn't know why she said it. Maybe just to watch him react. He did barely. Just a slight tension in his jaw. Elena, then. Her name in his voice did something strange to her pulse. She looked away, focusing on the passing buildings. What are the other rules? Besides the ones in the contract. Don't enter my study. Don't ask about my work. Don't leave the building without informing security. He scrolled through his phone. I have business dinners most evenings. You're not required to attend unless I specify otherwise. So I'm just supposed to sit in your penthouse like a doll on a shelf? You're supposed to be available when needed and invisible when not. He looked at her then, really looked, and she saw something cold and final in his eyes. This is a business arrangement, Elena. The sooner you accept that, the easier the next year will be. The car stopped in front of a glass tower in Tribeca, all sharp angles and expensive minimalism. The driver opened the door, and Cross exited first, offering his hand to help her out. She ignored it, stepping onto the sidewalk alone. His hand dropped. Stubborn. Realistic. The lobby was a study in modern wealth. Marble floors, abstract art that probably cost more than most people's houses, a doorman who greeted Cross by name. They rode the elevator to the penthouse in silence, the numbers climbing higher until Elena's ears popped. The doors opened directly into the apartment. 4,000 square feet of glass and steel and carefully curated emptiness. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Hudson, the afternoon light turning the water silver. The furniture was all clean lines and neutral tones, expensive, impersonal, like a hotel suite designed by someone who'd never actually lived in it. Your room is this way. Cross walked down a hallway without checking if she followed. Elena trailed behind, her heels clicking on the hardwood. He opened a door to reveal a bedroom that was bigger than her entire Brooklyn apartment. King bed with white linens, a sitting area with a view of the river, an ensuite bathroom visible through another doorway. Your things will arrive by 6. He handed her a key card. This accesses the elevator and the building gym. The code for the security system is in the folder Chen gave you. She stood in the doorway, unable to make herself enter. Once she crossed that threshold, it became real. This room, this life, this man who watched her with eyes like winter. I'll be in my study, Cross said. Don't disturb me unless it's urgent. Where is your study? He pointed down the hall, toward a door she hadn't noticed. The only room you'll never enter. Break that rule, and the contract is void. There it was again, that edge of threat beneath the civilized veneer. Elena wanted to ask what he kept in there that required such secrecy. What kind of man needed a locked room in his own home? But his expression made it clear the conversation was over. He turned to leave, and Elena heard herself say, Damien. He stopped, his shoulders tensing at the sound of his name. Slowly he looked back. Thank you, she said, the words tasting like ash. For the room. The light. Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, or something more complicated. For a moment he looked almost human. Almost reachable. Then the mask slid back into place. It's just a room, Elena. Don't read more into it than that. He walked away, and she heard the study door close with a quiet, final click. Elena stood alone in her gilded cage, watching the sun sink toward New Jersey, and wondered how many days until she stopped counting. Chapter 2. The performance. The dress had arrived that morning in a black box tied with silk ribbon. No card, no explanation, just Valentino's signature red label nestled in tissue paper. Elena had stared at it for 10 minutes before lifting out the gown. Midnight blue silk that caught the light like water, with a neckline that would bare her collarbones and the scar she usually kept hidden. Damien's message was clear. Tonight she was an accessory. She needed to look the part. Now, standing in front of her bedroom mirror while a makeup artist Damien had sent, another wordless arrangement, applied the final touches, Elena barely recognized herself. Her dark hair was swept into an elegant twist. Her lips painted the kind of red that looked like a dare. The dress fit perfectly, which meant he'd somehow known her measurements without asking. The thought sent ice down her spine. All done. The makeup artist stepped back, admiring her work. Mr. Cross has excellent taste. Elena met her own eyes in the mirror. Does he? The woman's smile faltered, and she began packing her kit with sudden efficiency. 5 minutes later, Elena was alone again, studying this stranger in blue silk who'd sold herself for her sister's future. A knock at the door. Not Damien's, she'd learned his knock over the past 4 days. 3 sharp raps that somehow conveyed impatience even in rhythm. This was softer, almost hesitant. Come in. A young woman entered, blonde and petite, wearing the kind of efficient black dress that marked her as staff. Mrs. Cross. I'm here to help with your jewelry. Mrs. Cross. The name still felt like a costume. The woman opened a leather case, revealing a diamond necklace that probably cost more than the brownstone. Elena's hand went instinctively to her mother's pearls. Mr. Cross specified these for tonight. The woman's voice was gentle, apologetic. The Met Gala has expectations. Of course it did. Elena let her remove the pearls, felt their absence like a small death. The diamonds were cold against her throat, heavy with the weight of other people's money. In the mirror, she looked like she belonged in Damien's world. Polished, expensive, owned. She hated how perfectly she fit the role. "He's waiting in the foyer," the woman said, then disappeared as quietly as she'd come. Elena took a breath, smoothed the silk over her hips, and went to meet her husband. Damien stood by the elevator, checking his phone with that focused intensity she'd learned meant he was working even when he appeared idle. He wore a tuxedo that had definitely been custom-made, the fit so precise it looked like armor. When he glanced up at her approach, something flickered in his expression, there and gone before she could name it. "You look acceptable," he said, pocketing his phone. 4 days of marriage, and he still couldn't manage a compliment. Elena smiled, sharp and bright. "You look like yourself." His eyes narrowed slightly. "Meaning?" "Expensive. Controlled. Exactly what everyone expects." She stopped in front of him, close enough to smell his cologne. "Isn't that the point of tonight? Meeting expectations." For a moment she thought he might respond with something real. Then his hand found the small of her back, that same hovering touch from City Hall, not quite contact but impossible to ignore. "The car is waiting," he said. "And Elena, tonight you smile at everyone I introduce you to. You laugh at their jokes. You make them believe this marriage is real. What if I don't want to lie?" His fingers pressed against her spine, just enough pressure to feel like a warning. "Then remember what happens if the contract is voided." Mia. Always Mia, the invisible chain that kept Elena compliant. She stepped away from his touch toward the elevator. "I know my role." "Good." He followed her into the elevator, and the doors closed them into that small space together. "There will be people tonight who want to know why we married so suddenly. Our story is that we met at a gallery opening 6 months ago. We kept the relationship private. The wedding was intimate by choice." "How romantic." The words came out flat. "It doesn't need to be romantic. It needs to be believable." The elevator descended, floor numbers dropping like a countdown. "Victor Constantine will be there tonight." Elena remembered that name from the gallery, from Damien's barely concealed violence at the mention of it. "The man I'm not supposed to talk to. The man you don't even look at." Damien's voice had gone cold, that dangerous edge she'd heard in her kitchen surfacing. "He knew your father. He'll try to approach you. You decline politely and find me immediately." "Why? What did my father?" "No questions about my work." He looked at her then, and his eyes held something almost like concern. "Almost. Constantine is dangerous in ways you can't understand. Promise me you'll stay away from him." The please was implicit, and that small concession, the closest thing to vulnerability she'd seen from him, made her nod. "I promise." The elevator opened onto the lobby, and Damien's hand returned to her back, this time making contact. His palm was warm through the silk, possessive, and Elena forced herself not to flinch. This was the performance. This was the price. The town car delivered them to the Met as the sun bled into the Hudson. Outside, photographers clustered behind velvet ropes, their cameras already flashing at the arriving guests. Elena's stomach clenched. "Smile," Damien murmured against her ear as the driver opened the door. "You're madly in love with me, remember?" She wanted to say something cutting, but then his hand was at her back again, guiding her onto the red carpet, and the cameras erupted in a strobe of light that turned the world white. Questions came from everywhere. Mr. Cross, who's your date? When did you get married? Elena, how did you meet? Damien's arm slid around her waist, pulling her against his side. Through the silk and wool, she could feel the solid warmth of him, the controlled strength. He smiled at the cameras, not his usual marble mask but something that almost looked genuine, and said, "Gentlemen, ladies, meet my wife." The feeding frenzy intensified. Elena kept her smile fixed, her body angled toward Damien's like she'd been doing it for years instead of days. His thumb traced small circles against her hip, a gesture that would read as affectionate to the cameras but felt like a reminder. Asterisk, stay in character. Play your part. Asterisk. Inside, the Met had been transformed into a garden of excess. Orchids spilling from crystal vases, champagne flowing like water, Manhattan's elite draped in couture and diamonds. Elena had been to museum galas before, but always as staff, always invisible behind a serving tray. Now, on Damien's arm, she felt the weight of 100 assessing gazes. Damien Cross. A silver-haired woman in Chanel materialized beside them, her smile predatory. I heard rumors of a wedding, but I didn't believe them. You always swore you'd never marry. I hadn't met Elena yet. Damien's voice was smooth, easy. His hand tightened fractionally on Elena's waist. Darling, this is Margaret Ashford. She sits on the museum's board. Elena extended her hand, channeling every gallery opening she'd ever worked. It's a pleasure. Your support of the contemporary wing is extraordinary. Margaret's eyes sharpened with interest. You know the museum. I'm a curator. Or I was before. She glanced at Damien, let herself trail off like a woman reconsidering her career for love. Before she agreed to take on the much harder job of managing me, Damien finished smoothly. Something in his tone made Margaret laugh, and just like that, they were accepted. The pattern repeated throughout the cocktail hour. Damien introduced her to venture capitalists and hedge fund managers, society wives and museum donors. Elena smiled until her face ached, laughed at jokes that weren't funny, and played the role of besotted newlywed with an expertise that frightened her. The worst part was how easy it became. How natural it felt to lean into Damien's side, to let his hand rest at her hip, to look up at him through her lashes like he was something precious instead of her warden. You're good at this, he murmured during a lull. His lips close to her temple in a gesture that would look intimate from the outside. At lying. At surviving. His thumb traced that circle again, and Elena hated how her body responded to the touch, warmth pooling low in her stomach. I chose well. The words should have felt like an insult. Instead, they landed somewhere complicated, somewhere she didn't want to examine. Damien. A new voice, male and warm with an edge of amusement. You're causing quite the stir. Elena turned to find a man approaching, late 20s, with Damien's coloring but softer features, his tuxedo worn with casual elegance. He smiled at her, and it was nothing like Damien's controlled expressions. This smile reached his eyes. Elena, my half-brother Marcus. Damien's voice had gone carefully neutral. Marcus, my wife. Marcus took her hand, but instead of shaking it, he lifted it to his lips. The mysterious bride. I'm devastated I wasn't invited to the wedding. It was intimate, Elena said, the lie smooth now. Everything with Damien is intimate. He keeps his secrets close. Marcus released her hand but held her gaze, something knowing in his expression. Tell me, how does a Brooklyn art curator end up married to Manhattan's most ruthless venture capitalist? The question was casual, but Elena heard the probe beneath it. Damien's fingers dug into her hip, warning or reassurance she couldn't tell. I fell in love, she said simply. Is that so hard to believe? With Damien? Yes. Marcus's smile sharpened. He's not exactly known for his warmth. Maybe you don't know him as well as you think. Elena felt Damien's surprise in the slight tension of his body against hers. Marcus studied her for a long moment, then laughed. I like her. Try not to break her, brother. He disappeared into the crowd, and Elena felt Damien's breath against her ear. Don't engage with Marcus. He's fishing. For what? Weakness. Damien's hand slid from her hip to the small of her back, steering her toward the dining room. He wants my position in the company. A sudden marriage raises questions. Maybe you should have thought of that before proposing a contract marriage. Maybe you should remember that contract protects you as much as it binds you. His voice was low, dangerous. Or would you prefer I'd let my family's collectors handle your father's debt the traditional way? The threat landed like a slap. Elena pulled away from his touch, her smile never wavering for the benefit of watching eyes. I need the ladies' room. She didn't wait for permission, just walked away on heels that wanted to buckle, her breath coming too fast. The bathroom was blessedly empty, all marble and gold fixtures and mirrors that reflected a woman who looked like she belonged here. Elena gripped the sink, staring at her diamond-draped reflection. 4 days. She'd survived 4 days of this performance, and already she was losing track of what was real and what was theater. The door opened behind her. A woman entered, older, elegant, wearing vintage Dior and an expression of careful concern. Are you all right, dear? You looked pale out there. Elena forced a smile. Just needed a moment. The crowd is overwhelming. First big event as Mrs. Cross. The woman moved to the mirror, touching up lipstick that didn't need it. I'm Catherine Winters. I knew Damien's mother, actually. Before she passed. Something in Elena stilled. Damien never mentioned his mother. I didn't know. No, I suppose he wouldn't talk about her. The suicide was such a tragedy. Catherine's voice was sympathetic, but her eyes in the mirror were sharp, assessing. Though between you and me, I never quite believed that story. Evelyn Cross wasn't the type. Elena's training kicked in, the same skills that helped her handle difficult donors at the gallery. I'm sorry for your loss. It must have been difficult. More difficult for Damien, I imagine. Finding her like that. Catherine capped her lipstick, turned to face Elena directly. But I'm sure he's told you all about it. Husbands and wives shouldn't have secrets. The probe was obvious now. Elena held the woman's gaze, channeling every ounce of conviction she could muster. Damien and I tell each other everything. Catherine smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. How refreshing. Enjoy the evening, dear. She left, and Elena sagged against the sink. Damien's mother had killed herself. He'd found her. And Catherine Winters didn't believe it was suicide. The pieces of Damien Cross were starting to assemble into something more complicated than the cold businessman who'd appeared in her kitchen. Something damaged and dangerous and deliberately hidden. She should stay away from those pieces. Should focus on surviving the year and nothing more. But as she returned to the gala, scanning the crowd for her husband's dark head, Elena felt the first stirrings of something that wasn't quite fear and wasn't quite fascination. She found him near the bar, his posture rigid, talking to a man with silver hair and a smile that made her skin crawl. Even from across the room, she could feel the tension radiating from Damien's shoulders. The silver-haired man's gaze found her, and his smile widened. Victor Constantine. Elena's feet carried her forward before her brain could intervene. She slid her hand into Damien's, felt him startle at the contact, and smiled up at him like he was her entire world. Darling, they're about to start dinner. We should find our table. Constantine's eyes moved between them, calculating. You must be the new Mrs. Cross. Victor Constantine. I was just telling your husband about a mutual friend. Frank Morgan. I believe he was your father. The name in his mouth felt like violation. Elena's fingers tightened on Damien's hand. I'm sorry, I don't discuss my father with strangers. If you'll excuse us. Of course. Constantine's smile never wavered. Though I should mention, Frank had some outstanding business with me before his death. Small matter, really. Perhaps we could discuss it sometime. Damien moved so fast Elena barely registered it. One moment he was beside her, the next he was in Constantine's space. His voice dropping to something that made the nearby guests unconsciously step back. My wife doesn't discuss business. Especially not her father's debts, which were settled in full. Each word was precise, controlled, lethal. If you have a problem with that arrangement, Victor, you can take it up with me. Privately. The threat hung in the air between them. Constantine's smile finally faltered. No problem at all. Just being friendly. We're not friends. Damien's hand found Elena's back again, possessive and protective in equal measure. Stay away from my wife. He guided her away. His movements controlled but his breathing slightly elevated. Elena could feel the violence humming beneath his skin, barely leashed. I told you not to engage with him, Damien said quietly as they walked toward their assigned table. He approached me. What was I supposed to do? Find me immediately. Not play the devoted wife and insert yourself into a situation you don't understand. His hand pressed harder against her spine. Constantine is not a man you want to antagonize. Neither are you, apparently. Elena glanced at his face, saw the muscle ticking in his jaw. Your knuckles are bleeding. He looked down at his right hand, seemed surprised to find split skin across his knuckles. It's nothing. When did you? Then she remembered the bathroom, Catherine Winters, the time she'd been gone. What did you do? Ensured Constantine understands the consequences of approaching you again. Damien's voice was flat, final. Let it go, Elena. But she couldn't let it go because she'd seen something in those few minutes. Damien Cross protecting her with a violence that went beyond contract obligations. Damien Cross losing his carefully maintained control because someone had threatened his wife. She should be terrified. Instead, she felt something warm and dangerous unfurl in her chest. Dinner was a blur of courses she couldn't taste and conversations she couldn't focus on. Damien's hand rested on her thigh beneath the table. Possessive, territorial, warm through the thin silk. Every time someone asked about their relationship, his fingers would tighten fractionally, a reminder of the performance they were selling. But when Marcus appeared at their table during dessert, leaning close to murmur something about family business, Damien's hand became a vice. Not tonight, Damien said. Father wants to meet her. Marcus's smile was pleasant, but his eyes were cold. Tomorrow. Dinner at the estate. We're busy. It wasn't a request. Marcus straightened, adjusting his cufflinks. 8 o'clock. Don't be late. He walked away, and Elena felt Damien's entire body go rigid beside her. His hand had moved from her thigh to the table, fingers pressed flat against the white linen like he was physically restraining himself. Your father, Elena said quietly, wants to assess his son's new acquisition. Damien's voice was bitter, self-directed. I should have anticipated this. What do I need to know? He looked at her then, really looked, and she saw something almost like regret in his eyes. That tomorrow will be worse than tonight. And that you need to be perfect. I'm always perfect. She meant it as defiance, but it came out tired. Damien's hand found hers under the table, his thumb tracing across her knuckles in a gesture that felt nothing like performance and everything like apology. I know. The car ride home was silent. Damien stared out the window, his jaw tight, his bleeding knuckles forgotten in his lap. Elena wanted to ask about his mother, about Constantine, about what kind of family dinner required her to be perfect. But the set of his shoulders warned her off. In the penthouse elevator he finally spoke. You did well tonight. I played my part. You did more than that. He looked at her, and in the elevator's harsh light, she could see the exhaustion etched into his features. When you defended me to Marcus. When you interrupted Constantine. You didn't have to do those things. The contract says I maintain the appearance of a legitimate relationship. That's what I was doing. Was it? The question was soft, almost vulnerable. The elevator doors opened before Elena could answer, or decide if she wanted to. Damien held the door, waiting for her to exit first, and she brushed past him into the penthouse's cold luxury. Elena. His voice stopped her halfway down the hall. She turned to find him still standing by the elevator, his hands in his pockets, looking more uncertain than she'd ever seen him. Thank you. For tonight. You're welcome. The words felt inadequate, too small for whatever had shifted between them in the past few hours. He nodded once, then headed toward his study, that locked room she'd never enter. But before he reached it, Elena heard herself say, Damien, your knuckles. You should clean them. He paused, looked at his hand like he'd forgotten about the injury. I'll manage. I know you will. You manage everything. She took a breath, made a decision that was probably stupid but felt necessary. But you don't have to. Manage alone, I mean. For a long moment, he just stared at her. Then, so quietly she almost missed it. Good night, Elena. His study door closed with a soft click, and she was alone in the hallway, still wearing his diamonds and his ring and the weight of a performance that was starting to feel less like acting and more like something she couldn't name. In her room, Elena removed the jewelry with shaking hands, replaced the diamonds with her mother's pearls. In the mirror, she looked like herself again, except for the eyes. Those belonged to a woman who was starting to understand that the most dangerous part of this arrangement wasn't Damien's coldness. It was the moments when he let that coldness crack. She climbed into bed still wearing the blue silk dress, too exhausted to change, and stared at the ceiling until dawn turned the windows gray. Somewhere in the penthouse, Damien Cross was awake too. She could feel it, the weight of his insomnia pressing against her own. Tomorrow she would meet his father. Tomorrow she would learn what had shaped Damien into the man who'd bought a wife to protect her from his own family. Tomorrow the performance would continue. But tonight in the dark, Elena let herself acknowledge the truth she'd been avoiding. Somewhere between the ceremony and the gala, between his threats and his protection, she'd stopped counting the days until freedom. And that terrified her more than anything else. Chapter 3: The Fracture. The morning light cut through Elena's bedroom windows like an accusation, turning the Hudson River into hammered silver. She'd finally fallen asleep around 4, still wearing the Valentino dress, and woken 2 hours later with silk creased into her skin and the phantom weight of Damien's hand still burning against her hip. In the bathroom mirror, last night's makeup had smudged beneath her eyes, making her look haunted. Appropriate, she thought, scrubbing her face with water hot enough to sting. She was haunted by her father's choices, by the contract she'd signed, by the way Damien's knuckles had bled for her. You don't have to manage alone. What had possessed her to say that? He was her captor, not her partner. The fact that he'd protected her from Constantine didn't change the fundamental equation. She was here because he'd given her no choice. Except he had protected her. Had moved with that barely leashed violence when Constantine mentioned her father. Had gripped her thigh under the table like she was something worth defending instead of something owned. Elena pulled on jeans and a sweater. Her own clothes, brought from Brooklyn in boxes she still hadn't fully unpacked, and padded barefoot into the penthouse's main living area. The space looked different in morning light, less like a showroom and more like what it was, a very expensive cage. The smell of coffee drew her to the kitchen. Damien stood at the espresso machine, wearing dark slacks and a white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows. No tie, top button undone, the most casual she'd seen him. His hair was damp from a shower, and he was staring at his phone with that focused intensity that meant he was working even at 7 in the morning. He looked up when she entered, and something flickered across his face. You're awake. So are you. She moved to the coffee maker, hyper-aware of the space between them. Do you ever sleep? Not often. He set down his phone, watching her navigate his kitchen with the awkwardness of someone in a stranger's home. There are mugs in the cabinet above the sink. Elena found one, simple white porcelain, expensive and impersonal like everything else here, and poured coffee that smelled like it cost more per pound than her old grocery budget. The first sip was perfect, which somehow made her irrationally angry. We need to talk about tonight, Damien said. But dinner with his father. The command performance Marcus had delivered like a summons. Elena leaned against the counter, cradling her mug. What do I need to know? Damien's jaw tightened. He picked up his own coffee, took a long drink, then set it down with careful precision. My father is Nathaniel Cross. He built the family business from nothing, which is a polite way of saying he built it on blood and leverage. He's 83, semi-retired, and the most dangerous man you'll ever meet. More dangerous than Constantine. Constantine learned from my father. Damien's voice was flat. Everything I am, everything I do, it comes from him. He'll want to assess whether you're an asset or a liability. Elena thought of Catherine Winter's words in the bathroom. Asterisk, the suicide was such a tragedy. Though I never quite believed that story. Asterisk, and your mother? Damien went very still. What about her? Someone mentioned her last night. Said she. Elena hesitated, but his expression made her push forward. Said she killed herself. That you found her. For a moment, she thought he might shut down completely, retreat behind that marble mask. Then he said quietly, her name was Evelyn. She died when I was 19. And yes, I found her. The admission hung between them, raw and unexpected. Elena set down her mug, took a step closer. I'm sorry. Don't be. It was a long time ago. But his knuckles were white where he gripped the counter edge, and she could see the muscle ticking in his jaw. My father will ask about your family tonight. Your mother, your sister, your father's business. He'll probe for weakness. What should I tell him? As little as possible. And Elena. He looked at her then, and his eyes held something almost like fear. Don't mention your father's debts. Don't mention the contract. As far as my family knows, we met at a gallery opening and fell in love like normal people. We're not normal people. No. His mouth twisted into something that wasn't quite a smile. We're not. The doorbell chimed, a sound Elena hadn't heard before in the penthouse. Damien's expression shifted, surprise crossing his features before he moved toward the foyer. Elena followed, curious who would visit at 7 in the morning. Through the door's security monitor, she saw a young woman with dark curls and a bright smile, holding a coffee carrier and a bakery bag. Elena's heart stopped. Mia, she breathed. Damien's hand was already on the door handle. Your sister. She can't see. But he was already opening the door, and Mia was sweeping in with the force of a small hurricane, talking before she'd fully crossed the threshold. I know you said you were busy, but I brought bagels and I need to tell you about this guy in my sociology class who... She stopped short, registering Damien's presence. Her smile faltered. Oh, sorry. I didn't realize you had company. Mia, this is... Elena's mind raced, trying to calculate damage control. Damien Cross. He extended his hand, his voice smooth and professional. Elena's husband. The bakery bag hit the floor. Mia stared at him, then at Elena, her expression cycling through confusion and hurt and dawning horror. Husband. What the fuck, Elena? Language, Elena said automatically, then wanted to kick herself. Mia, I can explain. You got married. Mia's voice was rising, the way it did when she was trying not to cry. When? Why didn't you tell me? Damien picked up the fallen bakery bag, set it on the console table with careful movements. I'll give you 2 privacy. He looked at Elena, something like apology in his eyes. I'll be in my study. He disappeared down the hall, and Elena was left facing her sister's betrayal and confusion in the middle of a penthouse that cost more than most people made in a lifetime. Mia! Don't! Mia held up a hand, and Elena saw it was shaking. Just don't. How long? A week. A week. Mia laughed, sharp and bitter. You've been married for a week and you didn't tell me. Your own sister. It happened fast. You what? Fell madly in love with a billionaire and decided to elope. Mia's eyes were bright with tears now. Do you think I'm stupid? I know what this is. Elena's stomach dropped. What do you mean? Dad's debts. The collection notices that kept coming even after he died. The way you kept telling me not to worry about money, that you had it handled. Mia swiped at her eyes angrily. You sold yourself to pay off his gambling debts, didn't you? The truth sat between them like a third person. Elena wanted to lie, to protect Mia from the ugliness of what she'd done. But her sister deserved better than more lies. Yes, Elena said quietly. Mia's face crumpled. Oh my God, Elena. How could you? Why didn't you tell me? We could have figured something else out. There was nothing else. The debt was. Elena stopped herself. Damien's warning echoed. Asterisk, don't mention the contract. Don't mention my family. Asterisk, it was too much. This was the only way. To marry a stranger. To live in his. Mia gestured at the penthouse, her voice breaking. Jesus, Elena. This isn't a solution, it's a prison. It's not like that. Isn't it? Mia moved closer, and Elena could see the fear beneath her anger. Does he hurt you? Because if he does, I swear to God. No. The word came out too fast, too defensive. He doesn't hurt me. He's actually been considerate. Mia studied her face with the intensity of someone who'd spent a lifetime reading her older sister's tells. You like him. I don't, that's not. Elena felt heat rise in her cheeks. It's complicated. Complicated how? You married him for money. That's not complicated. That's prostitution with a marriage license. The words landed like a slap. Elena flinched, and immediately Mia's expression shifted to regret. I'm sorry. I didn't mean. Yes, you did. Elena's voice was steady, but something inside her felt cracked. And you're right. I married him for money. For your college fund, for the brownstone. For a future where you don't have to know what Dad really was. I don't care about college. I don't care about the brownstone. Mia grabbed Elena's hands, her grip desperate. I care about you. And this. She looked around the penthouse again, and Elena saw it through her sister's eyes. All that cold luxury, all that expensive emptiness. This isn't saving me, Elena. It's destroying you. Before Elena could respond, Damien's voice came from the hallway. Elena. A word. He stood in the study doorway, his expression unreadable. But she could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands were shoved in his pockets like he was physically restraining himself. I should go, Mia said quietly. She squeezed Elena's hands once more, then headed for the door. Call me later. Please. The door closed behind her, and the silence that followed felt suffocating. Elena turned to find Damien watching her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. That was a complication, he said. She's my sister. She has a right to know. She has a right to nothing that jeopardizes our arrangement. His voice was cold, controlled. What did you tell her? The truth. That I married you to pay Dad's debts. Damien's jaw tightened. Did you mention the contract? The terms? No. Just that it was a business arrangement. Good. He turned back toward his study, then paused. She can't come here again. Not without prior arrangement. The words hit like a physical blow. You're banning my sister from visiting. I'm protecting our arrangement. If she's emotional, if she says the wrong thing to the wrong person. She won't. Elena moved down the hall, anger overriding caution. Mia would never do anything to hurt me. Intentionally, no. But hurt happens regardless of intention. He faced her fully, and she saw something complicated in his eyes. Your sister is a liability, Elena. The sooner you accept that, the safer she'll be. Safer from what? From you. From my family. From my father, who will be assessing every aspect of your life tonight. From Marcus, who's already suspicious. From Constantine, who now knows you exist and will use any leverage he can find. Damien's voice dropped lower, almost gentle. I'm not the villain here. I'm the only thing standing between your sister and people who would hurt her to get to me. The truth of it settled over Elena like a weight. She thought of Constantine's smile, of Marcus's probing questions, of the casual violence in Damien's split knuckles. This wasn't just about her father's debts anymore. By marrying Damien Cross, she'd painted a target on everyone she loved. I need air, she said. Elena. Please. She held up a hand, unable to look at him. Just give me an hour. I won't leave the building, I won't talk to anyone. I just need to breathe. For a long moment he didn't respond. Then, the rooftop terrace. It's private. Take the elevator to the top floor and use your keycard. She nodded, not trusting her voice, and retreated to her bedroom. Changed into running clothes, pulled her hair into a ponytail, and took the elevator up instead of down, toward sky instead of escape. The terrace was a garden in the clouds. Carefully manicured plants in modern planters, teak furniture arranged in conversation clusters, the city spreading out in all directions like a promise or a threat. Elena moved to the railing, gripped the cold metal, and let herself feel everything she'd been suppressing. Fear, anger, guilt. And beneath it all, that dangerous warmth that had nothing to do with protection and everything to do with the way Damien's thumb had traced circles on her hip, the way he'd said I chose well, the way he'd looked at her this morning like she was something more than an acquisition. I thought you might come up here. She spun to find Damien emerging from the elevator, carrying 2 mugs of coffee. He'd added a jacket against the October chill, but his feet were still bare, a detail so unexpectedly human it made her chest ache. I said I needed to be alone, Elena said. You said you needed air. I brought coffee. He crossed to the railing, set both mugs down, and stood beside her without touching. I'm sorry about your sister. I should have anticipated she might visit. You can't control everything. No, but I try. He picked up his mug, stared into it like it held answers. My mother used to say that about me. That I tried to control things that couldn't be controlled. Elena glanced at him, surprised by the admission. What else did she say? That I was too much like my father. That the Cross family curse was believing we could bend the world to our will through sheer force. His mouth twisted. She was right. Is that what you're doing with me? Bending me to your will? I thought I was. Now I'm not sure. He looked at her then, and the vulnerability in his eyes stole her breath. You're not what I expected, Elena. What did you expect? Someone who'd hate me. Someone who'd endure the year and leave without looking back. He set down his mug, turned to face her fully. Someone who wouldn't defend me to my brother or interrupt Constantine or offer to help me manage. Maybe I'm a better actress than you thought. Maybe. His hand lifted, hesitated, then fell back to his side. Or maybe this arrangement is more complicated than either of us anticipated. The air between them felt charged, dangerous. Elena should step back, should retreat to the safety of her designated role. Instead, she heard herself ask, why did you really marry me, Damien? And don't say it was just about your family's expectations. He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, your father witnessed a transaction. Something that could have destroyed my family's business if he'd talked to the wrong people. When he died, I needed to ensure his information died with him. You and your sister were loose ends. The words should have terrified her. Instead, Elena felt a strange calm settle over her. So you married me to keep me quiet. I married you to keep you alive. His voice was rough, raw. My father wanted you eliminated. Both of you. The contract was the only way I could protect you without triggering a war within my family. The admission hung between them, reframing everything. The cold proposal in her kitchen, the rushed ceremony, the separate bedrooms. All of it had been protection disguised as transaction. You saved my life, Elena said slowly. I bought your life. There's a difference. Is there? She turned to face him fully, and the morning light caught the gold in his gray eyes. You could have let your father handle it his way. You chose this instead. I chose the option that benefited me most. Don't romanticize it. But she could see the lie in the tension of his jaw, in the way his hands had curled into fists at his sides. Damien Cross had saved her, and it cost him something. She just didn't know what yet. Your mother, Elena said carefully. Catherine Winters said she didn't believe it was suicide. Damien's entire body went rigid. Catherine talks too much. Was it suicide? For a moment, she thought he'd shut down, retreat behind his walls. Then he said very quietly, my mother knew things about my father's business. Things that made her dangerous. She threatened to go to the authorities if he didn't go legitimate. His voice was flat, emotionless, but his knuckles were white where he gripped the railing. 3 days later, I found her in her bathroom. The medical examiner ruled it suicide. My father was at a business dinner with 20 witnesses. Oh my God! Elena's hand found his arm without conscious thought. Damien, don't! He pulled away from her touch, but not before she felt him trembling. I don't need your pity. It's not pity. It's... She didn't have words for what it was. Horror certainly. Sympathy. And a growing understanding of why Damien Cross had built walls so high and cold. I'm sorry. For what happened to her. For what you've lived with. I've lived with it for 15 years. I'll live with it for 15 more. He picked up his coffee, took a long drink. But that's why tonight matters. My father needs to believe our marriage is real, that you're not a threat. If he suspects you know anything about the family business, if he thinks you're a liability, he'll do to me what he did to your mother. Yes. The word hung in the October air, cold and final. Elena thought of Mia's fear, of the brownstone, of all the normal things she'd traded for this dangerous knowledge. Then I'll be perfect tonight, she said. I'll smile and laugh and make him believe I'm madly in love with you. I'll be whatever you need me to be. Damien studied her face, something complicated moving behind his eyes. Why? Because you saved my life. Because Mia needs to finish school. Because... She stopped, uncertain how to finish that sentence. Because, he prompted, his voice soft. Because somewhere between the contract and the gala, between his threats and his protection, she'd started to see him as something more than her captor. Because his split knuckles and his mother's death, and the way he'd looked at her this morning had cracked something open inside her chest. But she couldn't say any of that. Not when the year stretched ahead like a minefield. Not when every honest word felt like giving him ammunition. Because it's in the contract, she said instead. Something flickered in his expression. Disappointment. Relief. Before the mask slid back into place. Right. The contract. He moved toward the elevator, and Elena felt the loss of his presence like a physical thing. At the threshold he paused. There's something else you should know. About tonight. What? My father's estate has an art collection. One of the finest private collections in the country. He wouldn't look at her. I told him you're a curator. He'll want you to assess it. Elena's breath caught. You're giving me access to his collection. I'm giving you a reason to be there that isn't just as my wife. A professional purpose. Finally he met her eyes. It's a test, Elena. For both of us. If you impress him, if you prove your value beyond being a pretty face at my side, he'll see me as an asset instead of a liability. Yes. The calculation behind it should have felt cold. Instead, Elena recognized it for what it was. Another form of protection. Damien was giving her armor for the battle ahead. Thank you, she said. He nodded once, then disappeared into the elevator. Elena stood alone on the terrace, the city stretching endlessly below, and tried to prepare herself for a dinner that could determine whether she lived or died. But first she had a phone call to make. Back in her room, Elena pulled out her phone and dialed Mia's number. Her sister answered on the first ring. I'm sorry, they said simultaneously. Mia laughed, watery and relieved. You first. I'm sorry I didn't tell you. I'm sorry I made this choice without talking to you. I'm sorry for all of it. Elena sat on her bed, staring at the river. But I'm not sorry I did it. 'Cause you're safe now. You can finish school, you can have the future Mom wanted for you. That's worth everything. Even your happiness. Elena thought of Damien's bare feet on the terrace, of his trembling when she'd touched his arm, of the way he'd said I bought your life like it was a confession. I'm not unhappy, she said, and was surprised to find it true. Elena. I need you to trust me, Mia. Can you do that? Just for a little while. Silence stretched between them, filled with all the years of Elena raising her sister, protecting her, making impossible choices look easy. Okay, Mia said finally. But if he hurts you. He won't. Elena was certain of that now, in a way she hadn't been before. Damien Cross was dangerous, damaged, deliberately isolated. But he wasn't cruel. I promise. After they hung up, Elena lay back on her bed and stared at the ceiling. Tonight, she would meet the man who'd killed Damien's mother. Tonight, she would walk into the lion's den wearing diamonds and a smile and the weight of everything she now knew. Tonight, the performance would matter more than ever. But for now, in the quiet of her gilded cage, Elena let herself acknowledge the truth she'd been avoiding. Somewhere between the contract and the coffee, between his walls and his wounds, she'd stopped seeing Damien Cross as her captor. She just didn't know what to call him instead. Chapter 4. The Confession. The dress arrived at 4 o'clock. Another black box. Another silent message from Damien about expectations and armor. Elena opened it to find emerald silk that would catch light like water, with a neckline that suggested rather than revealed. Elegant. Expensive. Exactly what the daughter-in-law of Nathaniel Cross should wear to her first family dinner. She left it on the bed and went to find Damien. His study door was closed as always, but she could see light beneath it. Elena raised her hand to knock, then hesitated. Asterisk, the only room you'll never enter. Break that rule and the contract is void. Asterisk. She knocked. Silence. Then footsteps, and the door opened to reveal Damien in shirt sleeves. His tie loosened, looking like he'd been running his hands through his hair. Behind him, she caught a glimpse of dark wood and leather floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, and, unexpectedly, a wall of photographs. Elena! He moved to block her view, his body filling the doorway. Is something wrong? I need to know what I'm walking into tonight. She met his eyes, held them. Really no. Not the sanitized version. His jaw tightened. I told you what you need to know. You told me your father is dangerous. That your mother died under suspicious circumstances. That I need to be perfect. Elena took a breath, steadying herself. But you didn't tell me what he'll do if I'm not. What happens if I fail this test? For a long moment, Damien just stared at her. Then he stepped back, opening the door wider. Come in. Elena's pulse jumped. She was crossing a line, literally and figuratively. But she stepped over the threshold into Damien Cross's private sanctuary, and the door closed behind her with a soft click. The study was nothing like the rest of the penthouse. Where everything else was cold and modern, this room was warm. Rich mahogany, worn leather chairs, books that looked read rather than decorative. A desk dominated one wall, covered in papers, and a laptop displaying what looked like financial reports. But it was the opposite wall that drew her attention. Photographs, dozens of them, arranged with careful precision. Some were old, black and white, showing a young dark-haired woman with Damien's eyes. His mother, Elena realized. Others were more recent. Damien at various ages, always serious, always alone. And there, the photograph she'd taken from this room days ago. Young Damien with bruises, standing beside Marcus, both of them wearing expressions too old for their faces. You kept it, she said. You returned it. Damien moved to the window, putting distance between them. Most people would have used it as leverage. I'm not most people. No. He turned to face her, and something in his expression made her breath catch. You're not. The air between them felt charged, dangerous. Elena forced herself to focus. Tell me about your father. The real story. Damien was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he moved to the desk, pulled out a folder, and handed it to her. Read this first. Elena opened it to find newspaper clippings, police reports, and photographs that made her stomach turn. Crime scenes, bodies, evidence of violence that went far beyond simple business disputes. The Cross family business started in the 50s, Damien said, his voice flat and factual. My grandfather ran protection rackets in Hell's Kitchen. My father expanded into loan sharking, then real estate, then legitimate venture capital. He's worth $3 billion now. All of it built on blood. Elena looked up from a photograph of a warehouse fire that had killed 6 people. And you? I inherited enforcement duties when I was 19, after my mother died. His voice didn't change, but his hands had curled into fists. My father's way of ensuring I was committed to the family business. He gave me a choice: take over collections and investigations, or watch him destroy everyone I cared about. So you became his enforcer. I became his weapon. Damien's smile was bitter, self-directed. For 15 years, I've been the one who handles problems. The one who makes threats credible. The one who... He stopped, jaw working. Your father wasn't the first debt I've collected. He won't be the last. Elena set down the folder, her hands shaking slightly. She should be terrified. Should be running for the door, contract be damned. Instead, she heard herself ask, how many people have you killed? Personally? 3. All of them in self-defense. All of them buried so deep no one will ever find them. He said it without inflection, like reciting a grocery list. How many deaths am I responsible for? I stopped counting at 20. The number hung between them, heavy and irreversible. Elena thought of the man who'd made her coffee this morning, who'd stood on the terrace with bare feet and admitted he'd saved her life. That man and this killer were the same person, and somehow that made a horrible kind of sense. Why are you telling me this? She asked. Because you asked. Because you deserve to know what you've married into. Damien moved closer, and she could see the exhaustion etched into his features. And because tonight you'll meet the man who made me into this. If you're going to survive him, you need to understand what you're facing. Elena's mind raced, trying to process everything. The contract, the marriage. It's not just about protecting me from your family's collection methods, is it? No. He stopped a foot away, close enough that she could smell cedar and gunpowder. My father has been pressuring me to marry for years. Someone from the right family, someone who could provide useful connections. I refused every option he presented. So you chose your own option. Me. I chose someone he couldn't control. Someone who had no connections to our world, no leverage he could use. Damien's voice dropped lower. And someone who had every reason to hate me, which meant you'd never be accused of being complicit in family business. The calculation behind it was brilliant and cold and somehow protective all at once. Elena studied his face, seeing the careful strategy, the walls built from necessity rather than cruelty. You're not what I expected either, she said quietly. What did you expect? A monster. Someone who'd enjoy having power over me. She took a breath, made herself say the truth. But you're just a man who's been surviving a monster for so long you've forgotten what else you could be. Damien flinched like she'd struck him. Don't what? Don't try to save me. Don't look at me like I'm redeemable. His voice was rough, almost desperate. I've done things that can't be forgiven, Elena. I've hurt people. I've destroyed lives. The fact that I did it to survive doesn't make it noble. I'm not trying to save you. Elena moved closer, drawn by something she couldn't name. I'm just trying to understand you. Why? Because we're bound together for the next year. Because you saved my life even though it cost you something. Because... She stopped, uncertain how to finish. Because... he prompted, echoing their conversation from the terrace. Because when he looked at her like this, raw and vulnerable and trying so hard to be the monster he thought she needed him to be, she saw something worth understanding. Something worth protecting, even if he didn't think he deserved it. But she couldn't say that. Not when the weight of his confessions hung between them. Not when she was still processing the reality of what he'd done. Because I need to know who I'm performing for tonight, she said instead. Disappointment flickered across his face before he nodded. Right. Tonight. He moved to his desk, pulled out another folder. Nathaniel Cross is 83 but sharper than most men half his age. He'll ask about your family, your education, your career. He'll probe for weakness, for leverage, for any sign that you're not what I claim you are. Which is what? A woman I fell in love with. A woman who chose me despite knowing what I am. Damien's voice was carefully neutral. He won't believe it. He'll assume you're a gold digger or a plant from a rival family. Your job is to make him question those assumptions. Elena took the folder, flipped through pages of background information on Nathaniel Cross, his associates, his business interests. And the art collection is genuine. One of the finest private collections in the country. Caravaggio, Vermeer, Rothko, Basquiat. He acquired most of it legally, some of it through methods better left unexamined. Damien leaned against his desk, arms crossed. He'll test your knowledge. If you impress him, if you prove you have value beyond being decorative, he'll see you as an asset. And if I don't, then he'll see you as a liability to be eliminated. The words should have terrified her. Instead, Elena felt a strange calm settle over her. She'd spent years navigating difficult donors, managing egos, proving her expertise in rooms full of men who assumed she was just a pretty face. This was just another performance, albeit with higher stakes. I can do this, she said. Damien studied her face, something complicated moving behind his eyes. I know you can. You've been doing it since the day I walked into your kitchen. Then why do you look worried? Because... He stopped, jaw working like he was fighting with himself. Because I don't want you to have to. Because you shouldn't have to walk into my father's house and perform for your life. Because this entire situation is my fault. The admission hung in the air between them, raw and unexpected. Elena set down the folder, moved closer until she was standing directly in front of him. Your father's fault, she corrected quietly. You're just trying to survive him. Like I'm trying to survive my father's choices. It's not the same. Isn't it? We're both trapped by our father's legacies. Both trying to protect the people we love from consequences we didn't create. She lifted her hand, hesitated, then let it rest against his chest. His heart was racing beneath her palm. Maybe that's why this arrangement works. We understand each other. Damien's hand came up to cover hers, his fingers warm and slightly trembling. Elena, I'm not afraid of you, she said. I should be. After everything you've told me, I should be terrified. But I'm not. You should be. His voice was rough. I'm exactly the kind of man your mother would have warned you about. My mother would have seen what I see. Someone trying to do better than the hand he was dealt. Elena's thumb traced over his knuckles, the split skin from the gala, already healing. Someone who bleeds for the people he protects. I'm not protecting you out of nobility. I'm protecting an investment. Liar. The word came out soft, almost tender, and Damien's eyes widened slightly. For a moment they just stood there, her hand on his chest, his covering hers, the study's warm light turning everything amber and intimate. Then Damien pulled away, putting distance between them with deliberate steps. You should get ready. The car leaves at 7:30. The dismissal was clear, but Elena saw the way his hands shook slightly as he shoved them in his pockets. Saw the muscle ticking in his jaw, the careful control he was exerting over himself. Damien, please. The word came out almost desperate. Just get ready. Elena nodded, recognizing the retreat for what it was. She moved to the door, then paused with her hand on the handle. The photograph. The one I took. Why do you keep it? He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, because it reminds me who I was before my father finished breaking me. Before I became this. She turned to look at him, saw him silhouetted against the window, the city lights beginning to glow in the gathering dusk. He looked lonely, she realized. Profoundly, devastatingly lonely. You're not broken, she said. You're just bent. There's a difference. His laugh was soft, bitter. Is there? Yes. Elena opened the door, stepped into the hallway. Broken things can't protect anyone. Bent things are just stronger for having survived the pressure. She closed the door before he could respond, her heart racing as she walked back to her room. Inside, the emerald dress waited like a costume for the performance ahead. But as Elena showered and dried her hair and began the careful process of transformation, she couldn't stop thinking about Damien's face when she'd called him a liar. He'd looked surprised, vulnerable, almost hopeful. And that was more dangerous than anything else. The possibility that Damien Cross wanted to be seen as something other than the monster his father had created. The makeup artist arrived at 6, the same efficient woman from the gala. She worked in silence while Elena sat still, watching her face transform in the mirror. Foundation that evened her skin, eyeshadow that made her eyes look enormous, lips painted a subtle rose that suggested innocence. "Mr. Cross has excellent taste," the woman said again, and this time Elena didn't contradict her. The dress fit like it had been made for her body. Probably had been, she realized, noting the way it skimmed her curves without clinging. Elegant. Expensive. Exactly what the daughter-in-law of a crime lord should wear. She was fastening her mother's pearls when Damien knocked. 3 sharp raps right on schedule. "Come in." He entered, and Elena watched his reflection in the mirror as he took in her appearance. Something flickered across his face. Heat, appreciation, something darker she couldn't name. "You look," he stopped, cleared his throat. "Perfect. That's the goal, isn't it?" She turned to face him, and the movement made the silk catch light. "To be perfect enough to survive your father." Damien had changed into a charcoal suit. His tie a deep burgundy that probably cost more than her monthly salary at the gallery. He looked every inch the billionaire heir, all sharp edges and controlled power. But she could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands kept curling into fists. He was afraid, she realized. Not for himself, for her. "There's something I need to give you." He pulled a small box from his pocket, opened it to reveal a ring. Not a wedding band. She already wore the simple platinum circle from their ceremony, but an engagement ring. Emerald-cut diamond, at least 3 carats, set in platinum with smaller diamonds flanking it. Elena stared at it. "That wasn't in the contract. My father will expect it. He'll notice if you're not wearing an engagement ring." Damien took her left hand, his touch careful. "May I?" She nodded, unable to speak as he slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, catching light like captured fire. The weight of it felt like a promise, even though she knew it was just another prop. "It was my mother's," Damien said quietly. "She left it to me in her will. Specified that I should give it to someone He stopped, jaw working. "Someone I chose." Elena's breath caught. "Damien, I can't. It's just for tonight. For show." But his voice was rough, and he wasn't meeting her eyes. "My father will recognize it. It'll make the marriage more believable." She looked down at the ring, at this piece of his mother's history now adorning her hand. It should have felt wrong, wearing a dead woman's jewelry as part of an elaborate deception. Instead, it felt like trust, fragile and dangerous and real. "Thank you," she said. He nodded once, then stepped back. "The car is waiting. Are you ready?" "Well." She would never be ready to walk into the house of a man who'd killed his own wife, who'd turned his son into a weapon, who would eliminate her without hesitation if he deemed her a threat. But she lifted her chin, squared her shoulders, and said, "Yes." The drive to the Cross estate took 40 minutes, leaving Manhattan behind for the manicured wealth of Westchester. Elena watched the city lights fade, replaced by stone walls and iron gates and properties that stretched for acres. Beside her, Damien stared out his window, his jaw tight. "Tell me something," Elena said into the silence. "Something true. Not about your father or the business. Just something about you." He glanced at her, surprised. "Why?" "Because I need to remember you're real. Not just the role you're playing." She twisted the engagement ring on her finger. "Please." Damien was quiet for so long she thought he'd refuse. Then, "I wanted to be an architect. When I was young before." He stopped, started again. "I used to draw buildings. Impossible structures that couldn't exist in the real world. My mother kept every sketch." The admission was so unexpected, so achingly human, that Elena felt something crack open in her chest. "Do you still draw?" "No. My father burned my sketchbooks the day after her funeral. Said architecture was for dreamers, and I needed to live in the real world." His voice was flat, but she could hear the old wound beneath it. He was right. There's no room for dreams in the Cross family. Elena reached across the seat, found his hand, laced her fingers through his. He stiffened, then slowly relaxed, his thumb beginning that unconscious circle against her skin. "Maybe after this year is over you could draw again," she said quietly. "Maybe." But he didn't sound convinced. The car turned through gates that looked like they belonged to a fortress, up a long drive lined with ancient oaks. The Cross estate materialized out of the darkness, a Georgian mansion that sprawled across perfectly manicured grounds, every window blazing with light. Elena's grip on Damien's hand tightened. He squeezed back just once, then pulled away. "Remember," he said as the car stopped, "you're madly in love with me. You chose this life. And you're not afraid of my father." 2 out of 3 isn't bad," she murmured. His mouth twitched. Not quite a smile but close. "Which 2? Before she could answer, the driver opened the door. Damien exited first, then offered his hand to help her out. Elena took it, letting him pull her close as they walked toward the entrance. His hand found her lower back, that now familiar touch that felt like both possession and protection. The front door opened before they reached it, revealing a butler who looked like he'd been with the family for decades. "Mr. Cross. Mrs. Cross. Welcome. Mr. Cross Sr. is waiting in the library." They followed him through a foyer that could have housed Elena's entire brownstone, past rooms filled with museum-quality furniture and art that made her curator's heart ache. Everything was perfect, expensive, cold, like the penthouse, but with the weight of generations pressing down. The library doors opened, and Elena got her first look at Nathaniel Cross. He stood by the fireplace, a glass of scotch in hand, and the family resemblance was unmistakable. Same sharp features, same gray eyes, same commanding presence. But where Damien's face held carefully controlled emotion, Nathaniel's held nothing at all. He looked at Elena the way someone might examine a purchase, assessing value, checking for defects. "Father." Damien's voice was carefully neutral. "This is Elena." "So I gathered." Nathaniel moved closer, and Elena forced herself not to step back. The mysterious bride who's caused such speculation. "Tell me, my dear, what does a Brooklyn art curator see in my son?" The question was a trap. Elena smiled, channeling every ounce of conviction she could muster. The same thing any woman would see. A brilliant man who knows what he wants and isn't afraid to claim it. Nathaniel's eyes narrowed slightly. How romantic. And what did he claim exactly? "My heart." The lie came easily now. Everything else was just details. Details. Nathaniel's smile was sharp, predatory. "How refreshing. Most women who marry into this family are more interested in our assets than our hearts. Most women didn't know your son before they knew his net worth." Elena felt Damien's hand tighten on her back. "I fell in love with the man, not the money." "Did you?" Nathaniel moved to a side table, poured 2 more glasses of scotch. "Then you won't mind if I ask some questions about this whirlwind romance. Professional curiosity, you understand." "Of course." Elena accepted the glass he offered, even though the last thing she wanted was alcohol. "Ask whatever you'd like." What followed was an interrogation disguised as polite conversation. Nathaniel asked about her education, her career, her family. Each question was designed to probe for weakness, for inconsistency, for any sign that she was lying. Elena answered with the careful precision of someone who'd spent years managing difficult donors, mixing truth with strategic omission. Yes, her father had worked for the transit authority. No, they hadn't been close in his final years. Yes, she had a sister at Columbia. No, she didn't expect Damien to support her family financially. Beside her, Damien remained silent, his hand never leaving her back. She could feel the tension radiating from him, the barely controlled fear that she'd make a mistake. "And your father's death," Nathaniel said, swirling his scotch. "I understand there were some financial complications." Elena's heart stopped. This was the trap, the moment everything could fall apart. She felt Damien's fingers dig into her spine, warning or support she couldn't tell. "My father made poor choices," she said carefully. "But that's in the past. Damien and I are focused on our future together." How admirably forward-thinking. Nathaniel's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Though I do wonder, did my son tell you about his work? The nature of the family business?" "He told me he's a venture capitalist, that he invests in promising companies." The lie felt heavy on her tongue. "And that's all he told you?" "That's all I needed to know." Elena met Nathaniel's eyes, refusing to look away. "I married Damien, not his resume." For a long moment, Nathaniel just stared at her. Then he laughed, a sharp, genuine sound that was somehow more frightening than his interrogation. "You're cleverer than you look, my dear. And braver than most." He raised his glass in a mock toast. "Welcome to the family. Let's hope you survive it." The drive back to Manhattan took an hour, the silence in the town car so thick Elena could taste it. Damien stared out his window, his jaw tight, his hands curled into fists on his knees. She wanted to ask if they'd passed, if Nathaniel believed their performance, if the danger was real or just posturing. But the words wouldn't come. When they reached the penthouse, Damien unlocked the door and held it open for her, a gesture that felt automatic, practiced. Elena stepped inside, the weight of the evening settling over her like a shroud. "Elena!" His voice stopped her halfway to her bedroom. She turned to find him still by the door, his expression unreadable in the dim light. "What you did tonight." "I did what I had to do." She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the penthouse's perfect climate control. "Same as you." "Not the same." He moved closer, and she saw the exhaustion etched into his features, the way his shoulders had dropped now that they were alone. "You walked into a lion's den and stared him down. That took courage I didn't know you had. Or stupidity." She tried for a smile, but it felt brittle. "I'm not sure which yet." Damien's hand lifted, hesitated, then settled against her collarbone, gentle, almost reverent. His thumb traced the line of her mother's pearls, and Elena's breath caught at the unexpected tenderness of the gesture. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For tonight. For not running when you had every reason to." The question hung between them like smoke, impossible to dispel. What happens when the year ends? Damien's fingers stilled against Elena's collarbone, the scar beneath his touch suddenly feeling like a brand. He withdrew his hand slowly, deliberately, and Elena felt the cold rush in to fill the space where his warmth had been. "You should get some rest," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "We have the Vandermeer charity dinner tomorrow night." Elena watched him retreat into the armor she'd just seen him shed. "That's not an answer. It's the only one I have right now." He stood, putting distance between them with the practiced efficiency of a man who knew exactly how to fortify his defenses. "Good night, Elena." She listened to his footsteps fade down the hallway, followed by the decisive click of his bedroom door. The sound echoed in the cavernous penthouse like a judgment. Something hot and rebellious flared in Elena's chest. "That's not how this works. The contract stipulates public appearances." "Fuck the contract." Damien finally moved, crossing the room in 3 long strides. He stopped just short of touching her, close enough that she could smell cedar and something darker, sharper. Fear maybe. Or fury. Victor Constantine is not some society peacock you can handle with a smile and small talk. He's a predator, and Marcus just painted a target on your back. Then unpaint it. Isn't that what you do? Isn't that why I'm here? Because you're so good at controlling every variable, managing every threat. Elena. No. She stood her ground even though her pulse was racing. You don't get to shut me out of your study, out of your bed, out of your life, and then suddenly decide I'm too fragile for your world. I signed up for this. All of it. You signed up to clear a debt. Not to be collateral damage in a war you don't understand. Then help me understand. Her voice cracked, and she hated the desperation that bled through. You told me about your father, about your mother. You showed me the photograph. But then you asked what happens when the year ends and you wouldn't. You couldn't. She broke off, breathing hard. Damien stared at her like she was a code he couldn't crack, something beautiful and incomprehensible. I don't know what happens, he said finally, quietly. I've never not known what happens. I script every conversation, plan every contingency, control every outcome. But you. He lifted a hand as if to touch her face, then dropped it. You're the only thing I can't predict. The only variable I can't manage. And it's fucking terrifying. Elena's anger deflated like a punctured balloon. She saw it then. Not the ruthless billionaire or the crime family enforcer, but the scared 19-year-old who'd inherited blood and violence and built walls high enough to blot out the sun. I'm going to the dinner, she said softly. Not because the contract says so. Because hiding me away tells Victor exactly what he wants to know. That I matter. That you care. And that makes me a weapon he can use against you. Damien's eyes darkened. You're not a weapon. Then let me be a partner. The word hung between them, weighted with implications neither was ready to fully examine. Partner implied choice. Quality. Something more than captor and captive. More than contractor and contracted. Something real. Damien studied her for a long moment, and Elena could see the calculation happening behind those storm-gray eyes. Finally he nodded once, sharp and decisive. You go. But you follow my lead. No wandering off, no private conversations, and if I tell you to leave, I leave. I'm not stupid, Damien. No, you're brave. Which is infinitely more dangerous. The Vandermeer estate in Greenwich was old money incarnate. Rolling lawns, imported topiaries, a mansion that had been in the family since the Gilded Age. Elena arrived on Damien's arm wearing a crimson silk gown that Damien had delivered to her room that afternoon with a note. Wear this. Trust me. The dress was a strategic masterpiece. Modest neckline, long sleeves, but cut to emphasize every curve. It screamed expensive, elegant, untouchable. Screamed mine. You look like blood and revenge, Damien murmured as they entered the marble foyer. Elena glanced at him. Is that a compliment? From me? Yes. They were announced by a man in white gloves, and Elena felt the room's attention swing toward them like a single predatory eye. She recognized faces from the Met Gala, society matrons who dissected her marriage over champagne, venture capitalists who tried to corner Damien for private deals, the polished sharks who swam in Manhattan's deepest waters. And there, near the bar, holding court with effortless charisma, Victor Constantine. He looked nothing like Elena expected. Mid-50s, silver at his temples, expensive but understated navy suit. He could have been anyone's elegant father, someone's beloved uncle. But when his gaze found hers across the room, Elena saw the void behind his eyes. The complete absence of mercy. He smiled. Stay close, Damien said under his breath. They made it through cocktail hour with practiced ease. Damien's hand a constant brand at her lower back, Elena's smile never slipping. She discussed Baroque painters with Mrs. Vandermeer, laughed at a hedge fund manager's mediocre jokes, and pretended not to notice Victor circling closer with each passing minute. At dinner, Elena found herself seated directly across from him. Mrs. Cross. Victor's accent was barely there, just a ghost of Eastern Europe in his vowels. What a pleasure to finally meet you properly. Mr. Constantine. Elena accepted a glass of wine from a server, proud when her hand didn't shake. Please, Victor. We're practically family now that you've married into such an illustrious bloodline. His eyes flicked to Damien at the far end of the table, separated from Elena by strategic seating arrangements. Marcus's work, undoubtedly. Tell me, how are you finding married life? Enlightening. Victor laughed, a warm sound that didn't reach his eyes. Diplomatic. Damien chose well. Beauty and brains. A dangerous combination. Is that what I am? Dangerous. My dear, anyone Damien Cross marries is dangerous by proximity if nothing else. He leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice. Has he told you about Prague? Elena took a sip of wine, buying time. We don't discuss business at home. Wise. Though I wonder if he's told you about the photograph you found in his study. Her blood went cold. Victor watched her face with the attention of a scientist observing a specimen, cataloging every micro-expression. I see he hasn't. How interesting. Victor sat back, apparently satisfied. Your father was in Prague, 3 years ago. Shortly before his debts became insurmountable. My father had gambling debts. Nothing more. Gambling debts to my associate. Debts I acquired when said associate had an unfortunate accident. Victor's smile was reptilian. Which means technically you still owe me. Not money, of course. Information. Elena set down her wine glass carefully, aware that Damien was watching from the far end of the table. His body tense as a drawn bow. I have no information to give you. Don't you? You have access to Damien's home, his files, his bed. Victor's voice dropped to barely a whisper. I know about Nathaniel. I know Damien is planning to break from the family. Chapter 5. The Breach. 3 days. That's how long Damien maintained the careful distance he'd re-established. 3 days of polite morning greetings and separate breakfasts. 3 days of Elena cataloging his art collection in glacial silence while he made phone calls in Russian and Mandarin behind his study door. 3 days of sleeping in separate beds despite the fact that her body now knew the exact topology of his. The way his breath hitched when she touched the scar along his ribs, the sound he made low in his throat when she. Elena slammed the provenance file shut hard enough to make the Qing dynasty vase on the nearby pedestal shiver. She was not some Victorian maiden pining for a man who'd made his boundaries crystal clear. She'd survived her father's slow-motion self-destruction, buried him, and walked into this gilded cage with her eyes open. She didn't need Damien Cross to want her beyond the terms of their contract. Except now she knew what his hands felt like, mapping her body like he was memorizing scripture. Now she knew he paid her father's debts in secret, that he cooked carbonara when he couldn't sleep, that he'd built walls so high around himself because the alternative was letting people see the bruises. Now she knew, and knowledge was its own kind of prison. Ms. Morgan. Elena turned to find Marcus Cross leaning against the doorframe of the gallery room, all California charm and expensive dental work. He wore a navy suit that probably cost more than her first car and a smile that set every one of her instincts screaming. How did you get in here? I have a key. He held up a familiar black fob. Family privilege. Is my brother around? He's in a meeting. Elena set down the file, angling her body toward the door. Something about Marcus made her want to keep her exits clear. I can have him call you. Actually, I came to see you. Marcus strolled into the room with the easy confidence of someone who'd never been told no. He stopped in front of a small Rothko, studying it with apparent interest. This is new. Mark must be feeling generous. It's on loan from a private collector. For authentication. Marcus's reflection in the painting's glass was all sharp edges. My brother has excellent taste. In art and other acquisitions. Elena's jaw tightened. If you have something to say. The Vandermeer dinner tomorrow night. Marcus turned to face her fully. I assume Damien briefed you on the guest list. He mentioned it would be the usual crowd. Did he mention Victor Constantine? The name landed like a stone in still water. Elena kept her expression carefully blank, remembering Damien's split knuckles. His warning in the town car. You don't talk to Victor Constantine. You don't even breathe near him. Why would that matter to me? Marcus's smile sharpened. Because Victor has a long memory and a longer reach. And he's very curious about Damien's sudden domestication. He moved closer, dropping his voice to something almost intimate. Here's some free advice, Elena. My brother is playing a dangerous game, and you're a piece on the board whether you realize it or not. Victor will test you tomorrow night. And if you fail, that's enough. Damien's voice cut through the room like a blade. He stood in the doorway, and Elena had never seen him look quite so lethal. The expensive suit couldn't hide the coiled violence in his frame, the way his hands hung loose at his sides, ready. Marcus raised his hands in mock surrender. Just making friendly conversation with my new sister-in-law. Get out, Damien. Now. The air crackled with testosterone and unspoken threats. Elena found herself taking an involuntary step back, suddenly aware she was watching something primal and dangerous, something that had nothing to do with her and everything to do with old wounds and older grudges. Marcus held Damien's stare for a long moment before shrugging. See you tomorrow night, brother. He nodded to Elena. Mrs. Cross. The title felt like mockery. After Marcus left, Damien remained motionless in the doorway, his jaw working like he was grinding down words too dangerous to speak. Elena waited, her heart hammering against her ribs. What did he say to you? Damien's voice was dangerously quiet. He warned me about Victor Constantine. Elena lifted her chin. Care to tell me why I need warning? You don't. Because you're not going tomorrow night. Excuse me. The Vandermeer dinner. You'll stay here. And I know that photograph is his insurance policy. He leaned in close enough that Elena could smell his cologne, something cloying and expensive. Find out where he keeps the original. Bring it to me. And your father's debt dies with him. Refuse, and your sister's scholarship to Columbia becomes complicated. Elena's vision tunneled. She thought of Mia, brilliant and trusting Mia, who believed Elena had married for love, who was finally thriving after years of their father's chaos. I need to use the restroom, Elena managed. She stood abruptly, not waiting for permission, and walked toward the hallway with measured steps even though everything in her screamed to run. Behind her, she heard the scrape of a chair, Damien following. She made it to the powder room, locked the door, and braced her hands on the marble sink. Her reflection stared back, red dress, perfect makeup, and absolute terror in her eyes. The knock was gentle. Elena. Open the door. I'm fine. You're not. And we're leaving. Now. Elena unlocked the door. Damien stood in the hallway, his face carved from granite. Without a word, he took her hand and led her toward the exit. They passed Victor in the foyer. He raised his wine glass in mock salute. Lovely evening, Damien. We should do this again soon. Damien's response was to tighten his grip on Elena's hand and keep walking. They didn't speak in the town car. Damien's jaw was locked, his knuckles white where they gripped his phone. Elena stared out the window at the blur of Connecticut turning to New York, her mind replaying Victor's words on an endless loop. Your sister's scholarship becomes complicated. When they reached the penthouse, Damien finally broke his silence. Tell me exactly what he said. Elena repeated the conversation verbatim. With each word, Damien's expression grew darker, more remote. By the time she finished, he looked like a stranger, the man she'd married in that sterile City Hall ceremony, all ice and calculation. You'll stay in the penthouse until I handle this. Handle it how? That's not your concern. Like hell it isn't. He threatened Mia. Which is why you're staying here where I know you're safe. Damien was already moving toward his study, pulling out his phone. I need to make some calls. Damien, wait. He turned, and the look in his eyes stopped her cold. This is what I do, Elena. This is the world I warned you about. The world you insisted you could handle. His voice was brutal in its honesty. Victor made a move. Now I make mine. It won't be pretty, it won't be legal, and you sure as hell don't want to know the details. So that's it. You just disappear into your cave and I wait here like some princess in a tower. Yes. The word was final as a door slamming shut. Elena watched him retreat into his study, heard the lock engage. She stood alone in the vast living room, surrounded by millions of dollars of art and architecture, and felt like she was suffocating. She thought about the man who'd cooked her carbonara, who'd traced her scar with reverent fingers, who'd admitted he couldn't predict her. And she thought about the man who just locked himself away to commit violence on her behalf without even a goodbye. You're the only thing I can't predict. The only variable I can't manage. Maybe that was the problem. Maybe love, because that's what this was. She could admit it now in the wreckage of the evening. Maybe love was supposed to be unpredictable. Maybe trust meant letting someone see you commit sins in their name and not turning away. Elena walked to Damien's study door. Raised her hand to knock. Dropped it. He'd come back. He always came back. She just had to trust that when he did, there'd still be enough of the man she was falling for beneath all that blood. Damien didn't come back that night. Or the next day. Or the day after that. Elena called his cell phone 17 times. Texted 23. Got nothing but silence. Marcus called once. His voice tight with something that might have been concern. Have you heard from him? No. Have you? Oz. He burned a lot of bridges tonight. Stay in the penthouse, Elena. Don't open the door for anyone. The line went dead. Elena spent 3 days cataloging art she couldn't focus on, sleeping in Damien's bed because it still smelled like cedar and gunpowder, and slowly going insane with worry and fury in equal measure. On the third night, she woke to the sound of the penthouse door opening. She grabbed the first weapon she could find, a marble bookend, and crept into the living room in one of Damien's shirts. Damien stood silhouetted in the doorway, swaying slightly. Even in the darkness, Elena could see the blood. Jesus Christ! She dropped the bookend and ran to him. He caught her wrist before she could touch his face. His grip iron despite the exhaustion radiating off him. I'm fine. You're bleeding. Not my blood. The words should have horrified her. Instead, Elena felt something fierce and primal surge through her chest. Relief that he was alive, fury that he'd left, and underneath it all, a dark satisfaction that he'd drawn blood for her. Bathroom. Now. She half dragged him down the hallway, cataloging injuries as they went. Split lip. Bruised ribs, she could tell by the way he moved. Cuts on his knuckles. But he was walking, talking, alive. In the bathroom's harsh fluorescent light, the damage looked worse. Elena cleaned his face with shaking hands, her medical training from a long ago summer as a lifeguard kicking in. Damien sat on the edge of the bathtub, docile for once, and let her work. Victor? She asked quietly. Handled. Handled how? He won't threaten you again. Or Mia. Elena paused, antiseptic-soaked cotton ball hovering near his split lip. Damien. What did you do? His eyes met hers, storm gray and utterly unrepentant. What I had to. She should press. Should demand details. Should probably be horrified by the implications of handled, delivered in that flat, final tone. Instead, she cupped his face carefully, mindful of the bruises already blooming along his jaw. Don't leave like that again. His hand covered hers, warm and solid and real. Then give me a reason to stay. It was Elena who closed the distance this time. Kissed him carefully, avoiding his split lip, pouring 3 days of terror and fury and desperate relief into the gentle press of her mouth against his. Damien made a sound low in his throat, pain or surrender or both, and pulled her closer despite his bruised ribs. His hands fisted in his shirt that she wore, and Elena tasted copper and antiseptic and something that was purely him. I love you, she said against his mouth. You arrogant, violent, impossible man. I love you. Damien went very still. Then he pulled back just enough to look at her, really look at her like he was seeing her for the first time. You shouldn't. I know. I'm doing it anyway. A laugh escaped him, raw and surprised and edged with something that might have been hope. I've done terrible things, Elena. Things you don't know about. Things that would make you run if you had any sense. Then it's a good thing I lost my sense about 3 weeks ago. She traced the cut on his cheekbone with her thumb. I'm not asking you to be good, Damien. I'm asking you to be honest. To let me in. To stop leaving me behind while you bleed for me in the dark. If I let you in, if I show you what I really am, you might not like what you find. Try me. Something cracked in Damien's carefully constructed armor. He buried his face against her stomach, arms wrapping around her waist, and Elena felt his shoulders shake once, hard. She held him while he shattered. Held him while he pieced himself back together. Held him because he'd spent 3 days eliminating a threat to her sister, and came home bleeding and broken and still tried to protect her from his darkness. I don't know what happens when the year ends, Damien said finally. His voice muffled against her stomach. But I know I don't want you to leave. I know I wake up reaching for you. I know I would burn down the entire city if it meant keeping you safe. He looked up at her, and his eyes were raw, vulnerable, real. Is that enough? Elena sank to her knees between his legs, framing his bruised face with her hands. It's a start. This kiss was different. Slower, deeper, weighted with promises neither of them had the words for yet. When they finally broke apart, Damien rested his forehead against hers. I need a shower. And about 12 hours of sleep. I'll help with the shower. Elena stood, offering her hand. The sleep you're on your own for. Damien's laugh was startled and genuine. He let her pull him to his feet, let her strip him down with clinical efficiency that dissolved into something more tender when she discovered the full scope of his bruises. Under the hot water, with steam filling the glass enclosure, Elena washed the last 3 days of violence from his skin. Damien leaned against the tile and watched her with an expression she couldn't quite name. What? She asked. I'm trying to figure out what I did to deserve you. You didn't. That's not how this works. Elena smoothed shampoo through his hair, careful of a cut near his temple. You don't earn love like a transaction. You just let it happen. I'm not good at letting things happen. I've noticed. She rinsed his hair, then pressed a kiss to his shoulder. Practice on me. Later in Damien's bed, their bed now by unspoken agreement, Elena lay with her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat slow into the rhythm of sleep. His arm was a warm weight around her waist, his breathing deep and even. She thought about Victor's threat, about the violence Damien had committed in the shadows to neutralize it, about the photograph still locked away somewhere, insurance against a father who'd built his empire on blood. She thought about Marcus's warning and her sister's scholarship and the contract that had 6 months left before it expired. But mostly, she thought about the way Damien had looked at her when she said she loved him, like she'd handed him something infinitely precious and terrifying, like she'd given him hope. Elena pressed a kiss to his chest, right over his heart. Sleep, she whispered. I've got you. For once, Damien let go of control and did exactly that. Outside, Manhattan glittered in the darkness, oblivious to the war that had been waged and won in its shadows. Inside, 2 people who'd begun as stranger and captive breathed in synchronization and dreamed of futures that didn't include contracts or cages. Just each other. For now it was enough. Chapter 6. The Surrender. Elena woke to an empty bed and the smell of coffee. For a moment, panic seized her. 3 days of silence had rewired her nervous system to expect abandonment. But then she heard the clink of ceramic from the kitchen, and her racing heart settled. She found Damien at the island counter, showered and dressed in dark slacks and a crisp white shirt, studying his laptop with the focused intensity he usually reserved for hostile takeovers. The morning light caught the bruise along his jaw, turned it purple-green. You should still be sleeping, Elena said. He looked up, and something in his expression softened. So should you. It's barely 7. Couldn't sleep without you there. She crossed to the coffee maker, poured herself a cup. What are you working on? Damage control. Damien closed the laptop. Victor's exit created some complications. I'm managing them. Elena leaned against the counter, cradling her mug. She was still wearing his shirt, and she saw his gaze track down her bare legs before returning to her face with visible effort. When you say exit, he's alive, relocated, and significantly poorer than he was 4 days ago. Damien's voice was matter-of-fact. He won't be bothering you or Mia again. Because you scared him or because you have something on him? Both. He stood, crossing to where she stood. Close enough that she could smell his cologne, cedar and something sharp. I acquired certain financial records that would interest the FBI. Victor understands that if he so much as looks at you sideways, those records disappear into the right hands. Elena absorbed this. So you blackmailed him. I leveraged assets to protect my interests. It's what I do. Your interests being me and my sister. Yes. No hesitation. No shame. Elena set down her coffee and looked at him. Really looked at him. The bruises. The exhaustion he was trying to hide. The way he held himself like he was braced for her to recoil. Instead, she rose on her toes and kissed him softly, careful of his split lip. Thank you, she said against his mouth. Damien's hands came up to frame her face, thumbs stroking her cheekbones. You're not horrified. I'm terrified. But not of you. She pulled back enough to meet his eyes. I'm scared of losing this. Of the contract expiring and you deciding you don't need me anymore. Of waking up and finding out the last 2 months were just. He kissed her, swallowing the words. This kiss was different from last night's tender reunion. This was possession and promise and barely leashed hunger. Elena melted into it, her hands fisting in his shirt. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Damien rested his forehead against hers. I need to go to the office. Handle some things before they become fires. His voice was rough. But tonight we talk. About the contract. About what happens next. Okay. Elena traced the line of his jaw, avoiding the bruise. Be careful. Always. She watched him gather his laptop and briefcase, shrug into his suit jacket. The door he paused. Elena. What you said last night. About loving me. Her heart stuttered. Yes. I'm not good at this. At feelings, relationships, any of it. But He broke off, jaw working. I'm trying. To be what you need. You already are. The look he gave her was equal parts gratitude and disbelief. Then he was gone, leaving Elena alone in the vast penthouse with her coffee and the growing certainty that she'd fallen in love with a man who didn't believe he deserved to be loved at all. The gallery opening invitation arrived by messenger at noon. Elena turned the heavy cardstock over in her hands, studying the embossed lettering. The Constantine Gallery was hosting a retrospective of contemporary Russian artists. Opening night was Friday, 3 days away. Her first instinct was to throw it away. Victor Constantine might be neutralized, but his gallery was still his territory, his power base. Going would be walking into the lion's den. Her second instinct was to call Damien. Her third instinct, the one she followed, was to accept. She texted Damien. Got an invitation to the Constantine Gallery opening Friday. I'm going. His response came 30 seconds later. No. It's my decision. Lena. I just spent 3 days making sure Victor understands you're off limits. Don't undo that by showing up on his turf. I'm a curator. Skipping major gallery openings because of your feud makes me look weak. Makes me look weak. The phone rang. Elena answered. This isn't about looking weak, Damien said without preamble. It's about staying safe. I'll have security. I'll stay in public areas. But I'm not going to hide in this penthouse like some kept woman who's too fragile for the real world. You're not a kept woman. Then stop treating me like one. Silence. Elena could practically hear him calculating, running scenarios, trying to find an angle. I'll go with you, he said finally. No. Elena. No. You going with me proves his point, that I'm your possession, that I can't function without your protection. I need to do this myself. She softened her voice. Trust me. Please. Another long silence. Then, you take Marcus. What? My brother. He's been to every opening at Constantine's gallery for the past 5 years. Art collector credentials are solid. Victor will expect him to be there. Damien's voice was tight with reluctance. Marcus can provide security without it looking like I'm hovering. Elena considered. It wasn't ideal, but it was a compromise. Fine. But I choose my own dress. The red one. That's your armor for me, not mine. I'll wear what I want. Then something that might have been a laugh. You're going to be the death of me. Probably. See you tonight. She hung up before he could argue further. Marcus picked her up Friday evening in a Maserati the color of gunmetal. He wore a charcoal suit and Ray-Bans despite the approaching dusk, looking every inch the Hollywood handsome playboy he cultivated as a persona. Nice dress, he said as Elena slid into the passenger seat. Damien approve. Damien doesn't get a vote. Elena smoothed the emerald silk over her thighs. The dress was demure by some standards, high neck, long sleeves, but the back was entirely bare, plunging to just above her tailbone. Elegant and defiant in equal measure. Marcus grinned. You're going to give my brother an aneurysm. That's the idea. They drove into Manhattan, Marcus navigating traffic with practiced ease. Elena watched the city blur past, trying to ignore the knot of anxiety in her stomach. Can I ask you something? Marcus said. Sure. Why do you love him? Elena turned to stare at him. Excuse me. Damien. I've known him my whole life, and I've never seen him like this. Distracted. Reckless. Human. Marcus glanced at her. He burned a lot of bridges for you. Made a lot of enemies. So I'm curious. What is it about you that made him care? I don't know, Elena said honestly. I didn't mean to. Neither of us did. But you do. Love him. Yes. Marcus was quiet for a moment. He's going to hurt you eventually. It's what he does. It's all he knows. Maybe. Or maybe I'll hurt him first. Elena met his gaze. That's the risk you take when you love someone. Spoken like someone who's never been on the receiving end of Damien's particular brand of devotion. Marcus's voice was light, but something sharp glinted underneath. He doesn't do halfway. When he cares about something, he consumes it, controls it, destroys anything that threatens it. Is that a warning? A preview? They pulled up in front of the gallery, all glass and steel and intimidating modernity. Come on. Let's go poke the bear. The Constantine Gallery was a temple to contemporary excess. Soaring ceilings, stark white walls, art that probably cost more than Elena's childhood home. The opening night crowd was the usual mix of collectors, critics, and wealthy dilettantes pretending to understand the 15-foot canvas of black paint. Victor stood near the center of the main gallery, holding court. When he saw Elena enter on Marcus's arm, his expression didn't change, but she saw the calculation in his eyes. Mrs. Cross. Mr. Cross. Victor approached with his hands open, a perfect host. How delightful that you could make it. Wouldn't miss it, Marcus said smoothly. The Volkov pieces are extraordinary. Aren't they? Though I suspect you're both here for more than the art. Victor turned to Elena. How is married life treating you? Wonderfully. Elena accepted a glass of champagne from a passing waiter. Damien sends his regrets. Business kept him away. Of course. Business. Victor's smile was reptilian. Walk with me, Mrs. Cross. I want to show you something. Elena glanced at Marcus, who gave a subtle nod. She followed Victor deeper into the gallery, acutely aware that she was being separated from her security. Victor stopped in front of a triptych, violent slashes of red and black across canvas. Volkov painted this series after his daughter's death. Grief and rage in equal measure. He turned to face her. I understand grief. And rage. Is this the part where you threaten me again? No. This is the part where I tell you I respect what you did. Victor's voice dropped. You could have given Damien the information I requested. Saved yourself considerable trouble. But you didn't. Loyalty is a rare quality in our world. I'm not in your world. Aren't you? You married a Cross. That makes you part of this whether you want to be or not. He studied her like she was one of his acquisitions. Damien and I have a long history. Complicated. Not entirely adversarial. And I would hate for his attachment to you to become a liability for both of us. Elena's pulse quickened. Meaning my relocation was expensive. Embarrassing. I accepted it because I respect your husband's resourcefulness and because escalating would have been costly for everyone. Victor leaned in slightly. But other people in our world are not so pragmatic. People who see Damien's marriage as weakness. An exploitable weakness. Who? His father, for one. Nathaniel Cross doesn't appreciate being circumvented. And he will test Damien's loyalties. Victor's expression was almost sympathetic. Be careful, Mrs. Cross. The game you're playing has rules you don't understand. And in our world, ignorance is the most expensive currency. He walked away before Elena could respond, leaving her standing alone in front of the violent triptych. Elena found Marcus near the bar, flirting with a blonde in Valentino. She grabbed his arm harder than necessary. We're leaving. But we just got here. Now. To his credit, Marcus didn't argue. They made it to the car before Elena's hands started shaking. What did Victor say? Marcus demanded as he pulled into traffic. That Nathaniel Cross is going to come after me. After us. Elena stared out the window at the blurring lights. How bad is Damien's father? Marcus's jaw tightened. The worst. He built the Cross Empire on blood and has no problem spilling more to keep it. When Damien's mother tried to leave, he trailed off. Let's just say her suicide was very convenient for Nathaniel. Elena felt sick. Damien said as much. But I hoped, that it was hyperbole. That we were exaggerating. Marcus's laugh was bitter. Elena, everything you've seen so far, Victor, the threats, the violence, that's nothing compared to what Nathaniel is capable of. And if he thinks you're turning Damien soft, making him vulnerable, he'll eliminate the problem. Exactly. They drove in silence. Elena's mind raced through scenarios, calculations, the same kind of strategic thinking she'd watched Damien employ. She was a liability, a weakness, target, unless she became something else. Drop me at Damien's office, she said suddenly. What? His office. Downtown. Drop me there. Elena, it's almost 9 o'clock. Do it. Please. Marcus changed lanes, heading toward the financial district. Does my brother know you're coming? No. And don't tell him. Damien's office was on the 43rd floor of a glass tower that probably had its own zip code. Elena badged through security using the access card he'd given her weeks ago. For emergencies, he'd said. This qualified. She found him in his corner office, jacket discarded, sleeves rolled up, staring at multiple monitors displaying financial data that looked like the Matrix. He glanced up when she entered, surprise flashing across his face. Elena. What? We need to talk about your father. Damien went very still. Then he stood circling his desk. What happened? Elena told him about Victor's warning, about the threat of Nathaniel, about the sudden sharp understanding that she wasn't just married to Damien. She was married into a war she didn't understand. I should have told you sooner, Damien said when she finished. I thought I had more time to neutralize the situation before. Before your father decided I was an acceptable casualty. You're not a casualty. You're... He broke off, running a hand through his hair. Fuck. I never should have dragged you into this. You didn't drag me. I signed the contract. Elena crossed to where he stood, placed her hands on his chest. But I need you to tell me everything. About your father. About the photograph. About what you're planning. If I tell you, you become complicit. An accessory to. I'm already complicit. I fell in love with you. That makes me part of this. She looked up at him. Trust me enough to let me help. Damien studied her for a long moment. Then he moved to the window, staring out at Manhattan's glittering expanse. My father killed my mother, he said quietly. Made it look like suicide. Pills and a bathtub. Very tragic. Very neat. His voice was devoid of emotion. I was 19. Found her. And I knew it was him. But I couldn't prove it. Elena's throat tightened. The photograph was taken 3 days before she died. Shows her with bruises. Shows my father's ring on her throat where he choked her. Damien's reflection in the glass was hollow. She gave it to me. Told me to use it if anything happened to her. But I was a kid and he was Nathaniel Cross. Untouchable. So you waited. I bided my time. Worked my way into the family business. Became indispensable. And I collected evidence. Financial crimes, murder for hire, trafficking, everything. He turned to face her. The photograph is just the crown jewel. What I really have is enough to put him away for 3 lifetimes. Then why haven't you used it? Because he's still connected. Still powerful. If I move against him and miss, he'll kill everyone I've ever cared about. Damien's expression was bleak. Which, until 2 months ago, was a very short list. Now it includes me. Yes. Elena absorbed this. So what's the plan? We just wait for him to make a move. The plan was to quietly extract myself from the family business. Build up legitimate holdings. Create enough separation that when I finally bury him, there's no blowback on me or mine. Damien crossed to her, cupped her face. But that takes time. Time we might not have now that you're in the equation. Because he sees me as leverage. Because he sees you as everything. His thumbs traced her cheekbones. And he's not wrong. Elena's breath caught. They stood there in the empty office, surrounded by the evidence of Damien's legitimate empire, both knowing it was built on a foundation of blood and secrets. What if we force his hand? Elena said slowly. What? You said you have evidence. That you've been waiting for the right moment. She gripped his wrists. What if the right moment is now? Before he can make a move against me. Against us. Elena, if I go after him and fail. Then we fail together. But at least we're moving forward instead of waiting to be victims. Damien searched her face. You understand what you're asking. If we do this, there's no going back. My father will unleash everything he has to destroy us. Then we'd better make sure we destroy him first. Something fierce and dangerous kindled in Damien's eyes. You're sure? No. But I'm sure about us. And I'm tired of letting other people's violence dictate our lives. Elena rose on her toes, brushed her lips against his. Let's burn it all down. Damien kissed her then, deep and claiming, pouring weeks of restraint and fear and need into the press of his mouth against hers. Elena opened for him, met his intensity with her own, tangled her fingers in his hair. Not here, Damien said roughly against her lips. Home. No. Elena pulled back just enough to look at him. Here. I'm done waiting. Done being careful. Elena. I said no more separate rooms. No more distance. She reached for his belt. I want you. All of you. The parts you think are too dark, too damaged. I want everything. Damien caught her wrists, his grip gentle but firm. If we do this, if we cross this line again, I won't be able to let you go. Good. Elena freed one hand, traced the line of his jaw. Because I'm not going anywhere. The last of Damien's control shattered. He backed her against his desk, scattering papers and pens, his mouth hot and demanding on hers. Elena arched into him, gasping when he lifted her onto the desk's edge. Tell me to stop, Damien said against her throat, his voice ragged. Tell me this is a bad idea. It's a terrible idea. Elena tugged his shirt free from his slacks. Do it anyway. He groaned, low and desperate, and surrendered. They didn't make it home until after midnight. Elena's dress was creased, her carefully arranged hair a disaster. Damien looked thoroughly debauched, his shirt half-buttoned, his mouth swollen. They'd made love twice in his office, once on the desk in a frantic tangle of need, once on the leather couch with aching slowness. In the town car home they couldn't stop touching. Fingers entwined. His thumb stroking her wrist. Her head on his shoulder. "I talked to my lawyer today," Damien said quietly. "About the contract." Elena's heart stuttered. "And I want to void it. Officially. Draw up a new agreement that doesn't have a time limit." He turned to face her. "I want you to stay because you choose to. Not because you're obligated. What about the debt?" "My sister. Already handled. The debt was paid off 6 weeks ago. Mia's scholarship is fully funded through graduate school if she wants it. You've been free to leave for over a month." He lifted her hand, pressed a kiss to her knuckles. "I just couldn't bring myself to tell you." Elena stared at him. "You've been terrified I'd leave." "Yes. You idiot." But she was smiling, tears pricking her eyes. "I told you I love you. Did you think I was lying? I thought you were confusing gratitude with love. Or Stockholm Syndrome." His smile was self-deprecating. "I'm not great at believing people want me for me." "Then believe this." Elena straddled his lap in the moving car, framing his face with her hands. "I love you. Not your money, not your power, not because you saved me from debt. I love you because you cook carbonara at midnight and catalog your art collection with the same intensity you bring to hostile takeovers. Because you're broken in all the same places I am. Because when you look at me, I feel seen for the first time in my life." Damien's eyes were suspiciously bright. "Elena, I'm not done." She kissed him softly. "I love you because you're trying so hard to be good when everything in your life taught you to be brutal. Because you protected my sister even when you thought I'd leave. Because you let me see your darkness and trusted I wouldn't run. I don't deserve you. Probably not. But you're stuck with me anyway." She rested her forehead against his. "So void the contract. Let me stay because I want to. Let me fight Nathaniel by your side. Let me be your partner in every sense of the word." "Partners," Damien echoed. Then, with more conviction, "Partners." They sealed it with a kiss that lasted until the driver discreetly cleared his throat outside the penthouse. Inside they didn't speak. Didn't need to. Damien led her to his bedroom, their bedroom now, and undressed her with reverent hands. This time there was no frantic urgency, just slow burning need. He mapped every inch of her skin with his mouth, found scars she'd forgotten, bruises from their earlier passion. When he finally moved inside her, Elena wrapped her legs around his waist and held on, meeting him thrust for thrust. They moved together like a choreographed dance, finding a rhythm that was uniquely theirs. "Look at me," Damien commanded softly. Elena opened her eyes, met his gaze in the darkness. "I love you." His voice cracked on the words. "I don't know how to do this, how to be this, but I love you." Elena's breath hitched. "Say it again." "I love you." Harder now, more certain. "I love you, Elena Morgan Cross." She came apart in his arms, crying his name into the darkness. Damien followed seconds later, burying his face in her neck, his whole body shaking. Afterward they lay tangled together, hearts gradually slowing, skin cooling. Elena traced idle patterns on Damien's chest, feeling the steady thud of his heartbeat beneath her palm. "Tomorrow we go to war," Damien said quietly. "Tomorrow we go to war," Elena agreed. "But tonight we have this." She pressed a kiss over his heart. "Tonight we have this." They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, the city glittering outside the floor-to-ceiling windows. Two people who'd started as stranger and captive, creditor and debtor, now something infinitely more precious and dangerous. Partners. Lovers. Two halves of one whole, ready to burn the world down together if that's what it took to be free. Outside, Manhattan dreamed its eternal dreams of power and money and ambition. Inside, Elena and Damien dreamed of simpler things: morning coffee, late-night dinners, a future unmarred by contracts and blood debts. They didn't know that Nathaniel Cross had already set his plan in motion, that by tomorrow evening everything would change. They didn't know they only had hours left before the war came home. But for now, in the darkness, they had each other. And for now that was enough. The sun rose over Manhattan like a promise. Elena woke to Damien watching her sleep, his expression unguarded in the gray dawn light. She smiled, reached for him. "Good morning. It is now." He kissed her softly. "Coffee." "In a minute." She pulled him back down. "Stay here a little longer. Elena, we have plans to make. Strategies to discuss." "I know. But right now I just want to be here with you. No contracts, no debts, no threats. Just us." Damien settled back down, pulling her into his arms. "Just us." They lay there as the sun climbed higher, neither knowing it would be the last peaceful morning they'd have for a very long time. Neither knowing that Nathaniel Cross was, at that moment, reviewing surveillance photos of Elena leaving Damien's office at midnight. Neither knowing that Marcus had called their father the moment he dropped Elena off, fulfilling a duty he'd carried his entire life, loyalty to family above all else. Neither knowing that the game was already over. They'd already lost. They just didn't know it yet. But they would. Very, very soon. Chapter 7. The Reckoning. The knock came at exactly 9 a.m. Elena was in the kitchen, making coffee in one of Damien's shirts, her hair still damp from the shower they'd shared. Damien was in his study, on a call with his lawyer about officially voiding the contract. The morning had been blissfully domestic. Stolen kisses, comfortable silence, the easy intimacy of two people who'd stopped pretending they didn't belong to each other. The knock shattered it all. Elena set down her coffee mug. They weren't expecting anyone. The doorman always called up visitors. And Damien's security protocols were designed to prevent exactly this kind of unannounced arrival. "Damien," she called. He emerged from the study, phone still pressed to his ear, frowning. He mouthed "Stay there" and moved toward the door. Through the security camera display in the kitchen, Elena watched Damien check the feed. Watched his entire body go rigid. He ended his call without a word and opened the door. Nathaniel Cross walked in like he owned the place. Elena had seen photographs, the silver hair, the aristocratic features, the Seville row suits. But photographs couldn't capture the sheer presence of the man. He radiated power the way other people radiated heat, and when his gaze found Elena in the kitchen doorway, she understood why Damien had spent 15 years planning his destruction. Those eyes were empty. Utterly, completely empty. "Father." Damien's voice was carefully neutral. "This is unexpected." "Is it?" Nathaniel removed his leather gloves with precise movements. "You've been avoiding my calls for 3 weeks. I thought a personal visit was overdue." His attention remained fixed on Elena. "And I wanted to meet the girl who's caused such disruption." "Elena, this is my father, Nathaniel Cross." Damien moved to stand between them, a human shield. "Father, my wife, Elena." "Wife?" Nathaniel said the word like it was amusing. "Yes, I've heard about your little marriage. Quite the whirlwind romance. It's not your concern." Damien's tone was flat, dangerous. "Everything you do is my concern, son. You're a Cross. That makes you my business." Nathaniel finally looked away from Elena, focusing on Damien. "We need to talk. Privately. Anything you have to say, you can say in front of Elena." "Can I?" Nathaniel's smile was a razor blade. "Very well. Let's discuss how you spent the last month systematically dismantling arrangements I've spent years cultivating. Starting with Victor Constantine. Victor made a move against my wife. I neutralized the threat. By threatening him with exposure to federal authorities. By accessing financial records that are, technically, cross-family assets. Nathaniel's voice remained pleasant, conversational. You overstepped, Damien. I protected what's mine. And in doing so, compromised several delicate arrangements. Nathaniel moved deeper into the penthouse, examining the art on the walls with apparent interest. The Constantine situation. Your sudden withdrawal from the Volkov shipping contracts. Your refusal to handle the Chicago negotiations. He paused in front of a Monet. You're trying to go legitimate. How quaint. I'm done being your enforcer. Are you? Nathaniel turned, and the facade of geniality cracked just enough to show the monster underneath. Because from where I stand, you're still very much part of this family. You still carry my name. You still benefit from my empire. You don't get to cherry-pick which aspects you participate in. Watch me. The air crackled with tension. Elena's pulse hammered in her throat, but she forced herself to remain still, silent. This was between Damien and his father, between two apex predators circling each other. I could forgive the Constantine situation, Nathaniel said softly. Even understand it. New wife, protective instincts, all very natural. But you've been collecting evidence against me, Damien. Financial records. Witness testimonies. A particularly damaging photograph. Damien went very still. I don't know what you're talking about. Please. I've known about your little insurance policy for years. I let you have it because it kept you motivated. Gave you a sense of control. Nathaniel's smile was cruel. But now you've decided to actually use it. To leverage it against me. And that I cannot forgive. If you've known for years, why wait until now? 'Cause until now you were useful. Controllable. But this marriage has made you sloppy. Emotional. Nathaniel's gaze flicked to Elena, dismissive. You're putting a girl above family. Above legacy. And that makes you a liability. Get out of my home. Your home. Nathaniel laughed. Cold and genuine. Do you know who holds the deed to this penthouse, Damien? Who arranged the financing for your venture capital firm? Who opened every door you've walked through? He stepped closer. Everything you have I gave you. And I can take it all away with a phone call. Try it. Damien's voice was lethal. I've spent 15 years building a case against you. Murder. Racketeering. Trafficking. Money laundering. I have enough evidence to bury you for life. You make a move against me, and I hand it all to the FBI. Evidence that's currently in Marcus's possession. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Damien's expression didn't change, but Elena saw the muscle jump in his jaw. What? Your brother. The one you trusted with your backup files. The one who's been reporting to me for years. Nathaniel pulled out his phone, tapped the screen and held it up. Security footage. Marcus in Damien's study, accessing the safe, removing files. He delivered everything to me this morning. The photograph. The financial records. All of it. Elena felt the floor drop out from under her. Marcus. Charming, helpful Marcus who'd driven her to the gallery opening. Who'd warned her about Nathaniel. Who'd been playing both sides the entire time. You're lying. But Damien's voice was hollow. Am I? Call him. Ask him yourself. Nathaniel pocketed his phone. Marcus is loyal to family, Damien. Real family. Not some girl you picked up to settle a debt. Elena is my wife. Elena is a mistake. One I'm prepared to correct. The threat was explicit. Elena's blood turned to ice. Damien moved before Nathaniel finished speaking. A blur of violence that ended with his hand around his father's throat, slamming him against the wall hard enough to crack plaster. Touch her, Damien said, his voice barely human. And I will end you. Evidence or no evidence. Consequences or no consequences. I will personally put you in the ground. Nathaniel smiled even with Damien's hand crushing his windpipe. When he spoke, his voice was strangled but mocking. There's the son I raised. All that savagery so close to the surface. He grabbed Damien's wrist. But you won't kill me. Because the moment you do, every contact I have will come after her. After her sister. After everyone you've ever cared about. I've made arrangements. Damien's hand tightened. For a heartbeat, Elena thought he might actually do it. Might kill his father right there in the penthouse. Then he released him, stepping back with visible effort. Nathaniel straightened his collar, rubbing his throat. Smart boy. Now here's what's going to happen. You're going to annul this ridiculous marriage. Elena will sign a comprehensive NDA. And you'll return to the family business. Full participation, no more moral grandstanding. And if I refuse, then I'll make sure Elena has a very unfortunate accident. Same with her sister. You'll lose everything you care about, and you'll spend the rest of your life knowing it was your fault. Nathaniel moved toward the door. You have until Monday. That's 48 hours to make the right choice. There has to be another way. Elena finally found her voice. You can't just. I can do whatever I want, Mrs. Cross. This is my world. You're just visiting. Nathaniel paused at the door. Oh, and Damien. Marcus will be taking over your downtown office on Monday. Consider it a demotion. Or a lesson. Whichever helps you sleep at night. He left, closing the door with gentle finality. The silence he left behind was deafening. Elena stared at Damien, watching him process the total destruction of everything he'd built. 15 years of planning. 15 years of collecting evidence. All gone because he'd trusted his brother. Damien, don't. He held up a hand, not looking at her. Just don't. He walked to the bar, poured 3 fingers of scotch, and downed it in one swallow. Poured another. Elena approached carefully, like he was something wild that might bolt. We'll figure this out. There's nothing to figure out. He won. It's over. It's not over. There has to be. What? Another copy of the evidence. Some brilliant contingency plan. Damien's laugh was broken. I trusted Marcus. With everything. And he's been betraying me for years. Feeding information to Nathaniel. Probably laughing at me the whole time. We can get the evidence back. Break into wherever he's keeping it. And then what, Elena? Say we get it back. Say we actually manage to hand it to the authorities. You think Nathaniel won't follow through on his threats? Damien finally looked at her, and the despair in his eyes was crushing. He'll kill you. He'll kill Mia. And I'll have to live with that. So you're just going to give up? Annul our marriage and go back to being his attack dog? If that's what keeps you alive, yes. No. Elena crossed to him, grabbed his arms. Damien, listen to me. We can run. Disappear. Change our names, leave the country. He'd find us. He has resources you can't imagine. Then we fight. We find another way to expose him. With what evidence? His voice rose. Marcus has everything. Every document, every witness statement, every piece of blackmail I spent years collecting. I have nothing. You have me. The words stopped him. Damien stared at her like she'd spoken another language. You have me, Elena repeated. And I'm not going anywhere. I'm not signing an annulment. I'm not walking away because your father is a monster. You don't understand what he's capable of. I understand perfectly. He killed your mother. He built an empire on blood. He'll murder anyone who threatens his control. Elena moved closer. But I also understand that you've survived him for 34 years. That you're smarter than he is. That you're not alone anymore. Elena, this isn't some romantic movie where love conquers all. This is real. Dangerous. He will kill you. Then let him try. She framed his face with her hands. I'd rather die fighting by your side than live safely without you. So stop trying to protect me from your world and let me be part of the solution. Damien closed his eyes. I can't lose you. You won't. But you have to trust me. She kissed him softly. Do you trust me? Yes. Then trust that we'll find a way. Together. They spent the next 6 hours in Damien's study, cataloging assets, contacts, and potential allies. It was grim work. Most of Damien's legitimate business connections wouldn't touch him once they knew he'd gone against Nathaniel. And his underworld contacts were all too loyal to or terrified of his father to be of use. "What about the photograph?" Elena asked, studying the notes they'd made. "Marcus has the original, but do you have any copies? Even a digital file?" "No. The original was the only version. Too dangerous to duplicate." "What exactly is in the photograph?" Damien was quiet for a moment. "My mother, 3 days before her death. Bruises on her throat in the distinctive pattern of my father's ring. Visible defensive wounds on her arms. Timestamp proving it was taken shortly after they had dinner with the mayor. 24 witnesses who can confirm she was fine earlier that evening. And that's enough to prove he killed her. Combined with everything else, the timeline, the witnesses I'd compiled who saw him threaten her, the forensic analysis I had done on her suicide note that proved it was forged, yes. It's enough." Damien rubbed his eyes. Was enough. Now it's just evidence in Nathaniel's hands. Evidence he'll destroy. Elena absorbed this. An idea was forming, dangerous and desperate, but possibly their only option. What if we don't need the original evidence? "What are you talking about? Your father wants you back under his control. He wants the marriage annulled and you compliant. But what he really wants is for you to stop being a threat." Elena leaned forward. "What if we give him what he wants? Publicly?" Damien frowned. "You want us to actually annul the marriage?" "No. I want you to pretend to. Tell him you'll do everything he's asking. Go back to the family business. Sever ties with me publicly. Make him think he's won. And then we use the access that gives you. You'll be back in his inner circle, back in his confidence. And while he thinks you're broken and obedient, we collect new evidence. Different evidence he doesn't know about. Elena, that could take years. Or it could take weeks. Depends on how sloppy he gets when he thinks he's won." She grabbed his hand. "Your father's weakness is his ego. He can't resist gloating. And if you're broken enough, vulnerable enough, he'll make mistakes." Damien studied her. "You're talking about a long con. Something that requires me to publicly abandon you, to treat you like the enemy." "Yes. You'd have to leave the penthouse. Go back to Brooklyn maybe. Live like we're actually done." His voice was strained. "I'd have to be cold, cruel even. Make it convincing enough that Nathaniel believes it. I know. It could be months before we have enough to move against him. Months where I can't touch you, can't see you except in passing." Damien's grip tightened on her hand. "I don't know if I can do that." "You can. 'Cause it's temporary. Because at the end of it we're free." Elena kissed his knuckles. "And because I know you'll come back to me. Always." The word was fierce. "Elena, if we do this, if we commit to this plan, there's no room for error. One mistake, one slip, and Nathaniel will know. And he'll kill me." "No. You keep saying that like it's going to scare me off." She smiled, small and defiant. "I'm not scared. I'm angry. And I want to watch your father burn." Something dark and admiring flickered in Damien's eyes. "You're terrifying. I learned from the best." They spent the rest of Saturday perfecting the plan. Damien made a call to his lawyer, ostensibly to discuss annulment proceedings but actually to set up a shadow corporation in Elena's name. They created a secure communication system using burner phones and encrypted emails. They mapped out Nathaniel's known associates, his businesses, his vulnerabilities. By Sunday evening they were ready. "Are you sure?" Damien asked for the 5th time. They were in bed, the last night they'd spend together for however long this took. Elena was memorizing the feel of him, the warmth of his skin, the way his heart beat steady beneath her palm. "I'm sure. Once I call Nathaniel and tell him I'm complying, it starts. No going back." "Then let's not go back." She kissed him, slow and thorough. "Let's go forward. Together, even when we're apart." They made love with desperate intensity, both knowing it would be weeks or months before they could touch like this again. Every kiss was branded into memory. Every whispered word a promise. Afterward, Elena lay in Damien's arms and listened to him breathe. "I'll get you out of this," he said into the darkness. "Whatever it takes. I'll burn the whole world down if I have to." "I know." She pressed a kiss over his heart. "But let's try not to commit any more felonies than absolutely necessary." His laugh was startled and genuine. "No promises." Monday morning arrived too soon. Elena packed a single suitcase. Clothes, essentials, the photograph of her and Mia from her childhood bedroom. Everything else stayed in the penthouse, evidence of a life being dismantled. Damien stood in the doorway of their bedroom, watching her zip the bag. He'd already made the call to Nathaniel, already set the machinery in motion. "The brownstone is yours," he said. "Deeds in your name. It's paid off. Utilities are set up under one of my shell companies so he can't trace it. Thank you. I'm having a security system installed today. Best on the market. And there's a panic button that goes directly to my head of security, not the police. Damien, let me do this. Let me know you're protected, even if I can't be the one protecting you." Elena crossed to him, cupped his face. "I love you. Don't forget that when you have to pretend you don't love me back." "I could never forget." He kissed her, gentle and achingly tender. "This isn't goodbye. It's just intermission." "Intermission," she echoed. The car service arrived at 10. Damien carried her suitcase down, played his part perfectly. Cold, distant, every inch the ruthless businessman severing ties with an inconvenient wife. The doorman watched with undisguised interest. "Perfect. Let the gossip start here." Elena climbed into the car without looking back. She didn't trust herself not to break if she saw Damien's face one more time. As the car pulled away from the Tribeca penthouse, Elena allowed herself exactly 2 minutes of tears. Then she dried her eyes, straightened her spine, and prepared for war. The brownstone felt too big and too empty. Elena spent the first day unpacking, reacquainting herself with the home she'd grown up in. The home her father had nearly lost to gambling debts. The home Damien had saved. Mia called that evening, confused and worried. "Elena, what's going on? Someone at school said you and Damien are getting divorced." "It's complicated, me." "That's not an answer. You were so happy. What happened?" Elena closed her eyes. She couldn't tell Mia the truth, couldn't risk Nathaniel using her sister as leverage if he suspected they were running a con. "We rushed into things. It wasn't working out." "That's bullshit. Mia, you love him. I saw the way you looked at him at Sunday dinner last month. Like he hung the moon." Mia's voice cracked. "Did he hurt you? Because if he hurt you, I swear to God." "He didn't hurt me. I promise." That at least was true. "It's just over. I'm back in Brooklyn, and I need some time to figure things out." They talked for another 30 minutes, Elena deflecting and soothing until Mia reluctantly accepted that she wouldn't get the full story. After they hung up, Elena sat alone in the dark living room and let herself feel the full weight of what she'd sacrificed. The burner phone Damien had given her buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Security system active. Cameras installed. You're safe." He typed back, "Thank you." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, "I miss you already." Elena's throat tightened. "To be careful. Always. Sleep well, Zizn Moya. My life." He'd called her my life. Elena clutched the phone and let herself cry. The society pages ran the story Wednesday morning. Cross Air ends whirlwind marriage. Wife returns to Brooklyn brownstone. The article was brutal in its efficiency. Speculated about prenups and infidelity. Quoted unnamed sources claiming Elena had been overwhelmed by the lifestyle, that Damien had grown bored with his project wife. Every word was a knife. Perfect. Elena's phone exploded with texts from concerned friends, former colleagues, even people she barely knew offering sympathy or fishing for gossip. She ignored most of them, played the role of dignified woman trying to move on with her life. The burner phone stayed silent. By Friday, Elena was climbing walls. She hadn't heard from Damien since Monday night. Didn't know if the plan was working, if Nathaniel had bought the act, if Damien was safe. She was cataloging her father's old books, something to keep her hands busy, when the doorbell rang. Through the newly installed security camera, she saw Marcus Cross on her stoop. Elena's blood ran cold. She considered not answering. Considered calling Damien's security team. Then she remembered. She was supposed to be the spurned wife. The victim. Answering the door was exactly what she should do. She opened it, leaving the chain on. "What do you want?" Marcus looked tired. "Guilty. 5 minutes. Please. Why would I give you anything? You betrayed your own brother." "I know. And I need to explain." Elena stared at him for a long moment. Then she unhooked the chain and stepped back. 5 minutes. Marcus entered, looking around the brownstone like he'd never seen middle-class domesticity before. "Thank you." Clock's ticking. He turned to face her. "I didn't have a choice. About the evidence, about telling Nathaniel. He's had leverage on me for years. Something I did when I was younger, something that would destroy me if it came out. So you sold out Damien to save yourself." "Yes. No excuses. No justification. But I also tried to warn you. At the gallery opening in the car. I told you what Nathaniel was capable of. Warning me doesn't undo the betrayal." "I know." Marcus ran a hand through his hair. "I came here because you deserve to know what you're up against. Nathaniel thinks Damien is broken. Compliant. But I know my brother. He's planning something." "What makes you think that?" "Because he's too calm. Too accepting. When Damien actually gives up, there's a rage. A violence that bleeds through. But this." Marcus shook his head. "This is different. This is strategy." Elena kept her expression neutral. "If you think that, why come to me? Because whatever Damien's planning, you're part of it. And I don't want you to get killed in the crossfire." He pulled out a business card, set it on the entry table. "That's my direct line. If you need help, if things go sideways, call me. I owe my brother that much. You owe him a lot more than that." "I know." Marcus moved toward the door, paused. "For what it's worth. I've never seen him happy. Not once in 30 years. Until you." He looked back at her. "Don't let our father take that from him." He left before Elena could respond. She stared at the business card for a long time. Then she picked it up, photographed it with a burner phone, and sent it to Damien with a single word. "Interesting." The response came an hour later. "He's hedging his bets. Covering all sides. But we can use it." "Well done." Elena smiled. They were 3 days into the long con, and already the cracks were showing. Nathaniel Cross thought he'd won. He had no idea how wrong he was. 4 weeks passed in careful choreography. Damien returned to the family business with apparent obedience. Took meetings Nathaniel assigned. Handled enforcement that made Elena's stomach turn when she read between the lines of his carefully coded messages. Elena went back to work at her old gallery, a small contemporary space in Chelsea where the owner remembered her skills and didn't ask questions about her failed marriage. She rebuilt her routine, her independence, her public life. They never met in person. Never called. Never did anything that could link them. But the burner phones maintained a constant thread of communication. Photographs of documents Damien managed to copy. Updates on Nathaniel's movements. 3-word check-ins at midnight. "I love you." The society pages moved on to new scandals. The gossip dried up. Elena Morgan and Damien Cross became yesterday's news. Perfect. It was week 5 when everything changed. Elena was closing the gallery, alone except for the security guard, when Damien's text came through. "Need to see you. Tonight. Urgent. Can't wait for scheduled meeting." Her pulse kicked into overdrive. They had protocols for emergencies, but Damien had never invoked them before. She texted back. "When and where?" Place. 2 hours. I'll use back entrance. This changes everything. Damien arrived exactly on time, dressed in dark clothes, looking haggard and electric with barely contained energy. Elena barely had the door closed before he pulled her into his arms. "I found it," he said against her hair. "The way to destroy him." Elena pulled back to look at him. "What? How?" He produced a slim folder from inside his jacket. "Nathaniel has a partner. Someone he's been working with for over a decade on his most sensitive operations. Someone with everything to lose if this comes out." "Who?" "Senator Richard Morrison." Elena's breath caught. Morrison was a household name, chair of the Senate Committee on Oversight and Government Reform, presidential ambitions, squeaky clean reputation. "Morrison's involved in your father's business. Up to his neck. Drug trafficking specifically. Medical-grade opioids being diverted through Nathaniel's shipping connections and sold on the black market. Hundreds of millions in profit." Damien spread documents across Elena's kitchen table. "I found the records buried in Nathaniel's private server. He's been careless, arrogant. Thought no one would look because Marcus had already taken my original evidence. But you looked anyway. I never stopped looking." His smile was sharp. "Marcus took what he knew about. But there were files I kept separately, passwords only I had. Nathaniel assumed they were gone too. He got sloppy." Elena studied the documents. Shipping manifests, financial transfers, encrypted communications between Morrison and various shell companies that all traced back to Nathaniel Cross. "This is enough to bring them both down," she breathed. "More than enough. Morrison's been so careful to maintain his image. This would destroy him. Prison, disgrace, the end of his political career." Damien's voice was cold with satisfaction. "And that gives us leverage. You want to blackmail a senator. I want to give him a choice. He testifies against Nathaniel. Full cooperation, immunity deal with the FBI. Or we leak everything and let him burn alongside my father." He'd actually do it. Betray Nathaniel to save himself. He's a politician. Self-preservation is his religion. Damien gathered the documents. "Morrison's hosting a fundraiser next Friday at the Waldorf. I'm invited as part of my reintegration into society. You can come as a gallery representative. Morrison's wife collects contemporary art. And we approach him there. Privately. Away from cameras and witnesses. We give him 24 hours to decide. Then we move one way or another." Elena absorbed the plan, the risks, the potential for catastrophic failure. "If he tells Nathaniel, then we run. I have contingencies. False passports, offshore accounts, safe houses in 3 countries. Damien cupped her face. "But I don't think he'll tell. I think he'll take the deal. And then Nathaniel Cross goes to prison for the rest of his life. And your mother gets justice." "Yes." The word was fierce. "After 15 years. Finally." Elena kissed him, pouring 5 weeks of separation and longing into the press of her mouth against his. Damien responded with desperate hunger, backing her against the kitchen counter. "I've missed you," he said roughly. "Every second of every day." "Then stay." Elena pulled him closer. "We have a few hours before you need to leave. Stay with me." They barely made it upstairs. Clothes scattered across the steps, hands relearning familiar territory, mouths meeting in frantic kisses. In Elena's childhood bedroom, they fell into bed together and lost themselves in each other. Afterward, tangled in sheets that smelled like her lavender detergent, Damien traced patterns on her shoulder. 1 week, he said quietly. 1 week until we approach Morrison. 2 weeks until we have enough to move against Nathaniel. Then this is over. And then we get married again. Properly this time. No contracts, no coercion. Just us choosing each other. He kissed her temple. Then I'm taking you somewhere warm and far away from New York. Somewhere we can breathe. That sounds perfect. It will be. His arms tightened. I promise you, Elena. However this ends, we're together. That's the only thing I'm certain of. Together, she agreed. They fell asleep like that, stealing precious hours of peace before reality intruded. Outside, Brooklyn dreamed its restless dreams, unaware that in one of its brownstones, two people were orchestrating the downfall of a monster. Nathaniel Cross thought he'd broken his son. He'd only sharpened him into a weapon. And in 1 week, maybe less, he'd discover exactly how dangerous that weapon could be. The Waldorf ballroom glittered with New York's elite. Elena wore emerald silk and borrowed diamonds, playing the role of successful gallery curator making connections. Damien circulated on the opposite side of the room. Every inch the obedient son returned to the fold. They didn't look at each other, didn't acknowledge each other beyond a brief nod when Elena first arrived. Perfect performance. Senator Morrison held court near the bar, his silver hair and practiced charm drawing donors like moths to flame. His wife, Patricia, examined the auction catalog with apparent interest. Elena made her approach. Mrs. Morrison. Elena Morgan, Chelsea Contemporary Gallery. I understand you collect Basquiat. Patricia's face lit up. I do. Are you handling any pieces currently? Several, actually. I'd love to discuss them with you. Perhaps somewhere quieter. They moved to a private alcove off the main ballroom. Elena made small talk about art while her eyes tracked Damien's movement across the room. He was talking to Morrison now, apparently about venture capital opportunities. The signal came 30 seconds later, Damien adjusting his cufflinks twice. Mrs. Morrison, would you excuse me? I see someone I need to speak with. Elena returned to the main room, timing her trajectory to intercept Morrison as he stepped away from Damien. She accidentally bumped into him, stumbling just enough that he reached out to steady her. I'm so sorry, Senator Morrison, what a pleasure. No harm done. You're with the gallery, correct? Yes. Elena Morgan. She lowered her voice. Actually, Senator, I was hoping to discuss something with you. A mutual acquaintance suggested you might be interested in a particular acquisition. Morrison's expression didn't change, but she saw his eyes sharpen with interest. Oh, Nathaniel Cross mentioned you collect more than just art. Certain documents, perhaps. The temperature around them dropped 10 degrees. Morrison's hand tightened on her elbow, just shy of painful. I think you have me confused with someone else. I don't think I do. But perhaps we should discuss this somewhere more private. Elena gestured toward the terrace. The view is spectacular. Morrison held her gaze for a long moment. Then he nodded once, sharp and cold. On the terrace, with the city glittering below and the sounds of the party muffled behind glass doors, Morrison dropped all pretense of civility. Who are you really? Damien Cross's wife. Soon to be ex-wife officially, but that's just paperwork. You're working with Damien. Against his father. And, unfortunately for you, we have evidence of your partnership with Nathaniel. Shipping records, financial transfers, communications that make it very clear you've been facilitating drug trafficking for profit. Elena kept her voice pleasant, conversational. Enough to end your career. Possibly end you in prison. Morrison's face went white, then red. You're bluffing. Elena pulled out her phone, showed him photographs of documents. Shipping manifests with his signature. Bank statements showing transfers from his personal accounts to shell companies. An email discussing shipment details. We have more. Much more. Enough to bury you and Nathaniel both. She pocketed the phone. But we're prepared to offer you a deal. What kind of deal? Full immunity in exchange for testimony against Nathaniel Cross. You cooperate with federal prosecutors, provide evidence of his operations, testify at trial. You walk away clean. Get to keep your Senate seat, your reputation, your freedom. And if I refuse, then we leak everything. The press, the FBI, your political opponents, everyone gets a copy. You'll be finished. Possibly in prison within the year. Elena smiled, cold and sharp. Your choice, Senator. But you have 24 hours to decide. Nathaniel will kill me if I testify against him. Nathaniel will be in federal custody. And you'll have witness protection if you need it. The government takes care of its assets. She moved toward the door. 24 hours. Contact Damien with your decision. And Senator, choose wisely. She left him on the terrace, his face the color of ash. The phone call came 16 hours later. Elena was in the gallery, cataloging new acquisitions, when Damien's text arrived. He took the deal. Meeting with FBI tomorrow. It's happening. Her hands shook as she typed back. How soon? Federal agents are moving on Nathaniel tonight. Arrest warrant already issued. Morrison's testimony sealed it. Elena sat down hard, unable to quite believe it. After everything, the contract, the marriage, the threats, the separation, the long con, it was actually over. Are you safe? Type. At the penthouse with security. Nathaniel doesn't know yet. He will in about 2 hours when they take him into custody. Come home, Elena. Please. I need you here. She was already gathering her things, texting her boss that she had a family emergency. My way. The penthouse had never looked so beautiful. Elena let herself in with the key she'd never returned, followed the sound of Damien's voice to his study. He was on the phone with someone. His lawyer, she thought, giving clipped instructions about damage control and press statements. When he saw her in the doorway, he ended the call mid-sentence. They met in the middle of the room, holding each other so tightly it hurt. It's over, Damien said against her hair. Morrison's in protective custody. The FBI has everything. Nathaniel's being arrested as we speak. What about Marcus? He's not implicated. Morrison's testimony focused on Nathaniel. Marcus was smart enough to stay clean, at least on paper. Damien pulled back to look at her. But he called me an hour ago. Said he was sorry. Said he'd testify too if it helped, immunity or not. Will you forgive him? Eventually. Maybe. He's still my brother. Damien cupped her face. But right now, I don't want to think about Marcus or Nathaniel or any of it. I just want you. Elena kissed him, soft and lingering. Then you have me. No more separation. No more pretending. No more contracts. No more cages. They stood there in the study where this had all begun, holding each other as the sun set over Manhattan. Outside, federal agents were dismantling Nathaniel Cross's empire. Inside, two people who'd started as strangers were finally, truly free. Marry me, Damien said suddenly. Again. Next week, next month, I don't care. But marry me for real this time. Because you want to. Because I love you more than I've ever loved anything. Yes. Elena was crying and laughing at the same time. Yes, you ridiculous man. Of course, yes. He kissed her then, deep and claiming and full of promise. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Damien rested his forehead against hers. I'm taking you to Greece. 2 weeks minimum. Maybe a month. Somewhere with sun and sea and absolutely no crime families. That sounds perfect. But first, Elena pulled him toward the bedroom. First, I want to make up for 5 weeks of sleeping alone. Damien's laugh was bright and genuine. I can work with that. They made love as the city darkened outside, as Nathaniel Cross was processed into federal custody, as news alerts began pinging phones across Manhattan with a headline. Crime boss Nathaniel Cross arrested in federal sting. But Elena and Damien didn't see any of it. They were too busy writing their own ending, one that had nothing to do with contracts or coercion or blood debts. One that was just about two people who'd chosen each other again and again, even when everything else was trying to tear them apart. One that was just beginning. Chapter 8. The Vow. The call came 3 days after Nathaniel's arrest. Elena was at the gallery, discussing a new exhibition with her boss, when her phone buzzed with an unknown number. She almost ignored it, had been ignoring most calls since the news broke about the Cross family scandal, but something made her answer. Elena Morgan. The voice was unfamiliar. Well, Accented. Yes. You should have stayed out of Cross family business. The line went dead. Elena's blood turned to ice. She immediately called Damien, fingers shaking as she pulled up his contact. Elena. What's wrong? Someone just called me. Threatened me. Said I should have stayed out of Cross business. Silence. Then. Where are you? The gallery. Chelsea. Stay there. Don't leave. I'm sending security. His voice was tight with barely controlled panic. Lock the doors. Don't open them for anyone except my security team. They'll be there in 10 minutes. Damien what's? Nathaniel's out on bail. Posted bond 3 hours ago. I just found out. A pause heavy with fury and fear. He's making his move. Elena, please. Stay where you are. Okay. I will. I promise. But she'd barely hung up when the gallery lights went out. Elena's first thought was a blown fuse. Her second thought, as she heard footsteps in the darkness, was run. She made it to the back exit before hands grabbed her from behind. A cloth pressed over her mouth and nose, chemical sweet and suffocating. She struggled, tried to scream, but the world was already going gray at the edges. Her last conscious thought was of Damien's face. Then nothing. Elena woke to the smell of gasoline and rust. Her head pounded. Her wrists were zip-tied behind her back, secured to a metal chair. When she tried to move, pain shot through her shoulders. The space around her was dark, cavernous. A warehouse, she thought. Abandoned, judging by the broken windows and debris scattered across the concrete floor. Daylight filtered through gaps in the roof, which meant she'd been unconscious for hours. She's awake. The voice came from her left. Elena turned her head, vision swimming, and saw Victor Constantine emerge from the shadows. Victor. Her voice was hoarse. I thought Damien handled you. He did. Relocated me. Made me poor. Very inconvenient. Victor circled her chair like a shark. But Nathaniel and I have history. When he called from his lawyer's office, asked me to handle a problem, I couldn't refuse. Old debts, you understand. Damien will kill you. Will he? I'm betting Nathaniel gets to him first. Right now, your husband is receiving instructions. Come alone to this address, or I slit your throat and send him the video. Victor's smile was cold. Very dramatic, but Nathaniel does love his theater. You won't get away with this. Perhaps not. But I'll have the satisfaction of watching Nathaniel destroy the son who betrayed him. Victor checked his watch. Should be here any minute now. I suggest you prepare yourself. This won't be pleasant. Elena tested the zip ties, but they were industrial grade, cutting into her wrists when she pulled. The chair was bolted to the floor. No weapons within reach. No obvious escape route. She was completely, utterly trapped. Damien arrived exactly when Victor said he would. Elena heard the screech of tires outside, a car door slamming. Then footsteps, measured, deliberate, echoing through the warehouse. Elena! I'm here, she called back. Damien, it's a trap. I know. He emerged into the dim light, and Elena's heart stopped. He was unarmed, wearing jeans and a black t-shirt, looking more like the scared 19-year-old from the photograph than the polished billionaire. Vulnerable in a way that terrified her. But I'm here anyway. How touching. Nathaniel Cross stepped from behind a support column, flanked by 2 men with guns. Despite 3 days in federal custody, he looked impeccable. Tailored suit, silver hair perfectly styled, not a hair out of place. But his eyes. God, his eyes were full of murder. Hello, son. Thank you for coming. Let her go. Damien's voice was steady despite the guns pointed at his chest. This is between us. Is it? Because from where I stand, she's very much part of this. She convinced you to betray your family. She helped Morrison turn on me. She destroyed everything I built. Nathaniel moved closer to Elena, and she saw Damien's whole body tense. So no. She doesn't get to walk away. What do you want? What do I want? Nathaniel laughed, sharp and brittle. I want my empire back. I want my son's loyalty. I want the last 15 years of your plotting and scheming erased. He pulled out a gun, sleek, black, probably illegal. But since I can't have those things, I'll settle for watching you suffer the way you made me suffer. He pressed the gun to Elena's temple. Elena closed her eyes, felt the cold metal against her skin, heard Damien make a sound like something breaking. Don't. Damien's voice cracked. Please. I'll do anything. Just don't hurt her. Anything. Nathaniel's laugh was cruel. What if I want you to kill her yourself? Would you do that? Would you put a bullet in the woman you love to spare her from something worse? Yes. The word was immediate. Certain. Devastating. Elena's eyes flew open. Damien, no. If it's me or some stranger, if it's quick instead of slow, if it means she doesn't suffer, yes. I'd do it. Damien looked at her, and the love in his eyes was absolute. I'm sorry, Elena, but I won't let him torture you. How romantic. Nathaniel removed the gun from Elena's head, tossed it to Damien. Then do it. Right now. Prove your loyalty is to family, not to her. Kill her, and I'll let you live. Refuse, and I kill you both. Damien caught the gun, stared at it like it was a snake. You have 10 seconds. 9, 8. Damien, don't you dare. 7. 5. Damien raised the gun, pointed it at Elena. Their eyes met across the warehouse. In that moment, Elena saw everything. His love, his desperation, his absolute certainty that this was the only way to save her. And she understood. I love you, Damien said softly. Then he spun and fired 3 shots in rapid succession. The first hit Nathaniel's shoulder, spinning him around. The second hit one of the gunmen in the leg. The third shattered a window. Chaos erupted. Victor lunged for Elena. Damien tackled him, and they went down in a tangle of violence. Nathaniel struggled to his feet, bleeding but reaching for a backup weapon. The uninjured gunman raised his weapon, aiming at Damien's back. Elena did the only thing she could, threw her weight sideways, toppling the chair and herself. The motion put her directly in the gunman's line of fire. The shot went wide. And then the warehouse exploded with motion as a SWAT team flooded through the doors. FBI. Drop your weapons. It was over in seconds. Victor and the gunman were on the ground, hands zip-tied behind their backs. Nathaniel was being read his rights, blood soaking through his expensive suit. MTs swarmed in, moving with practiced efficiency. And Damien was cutting Elena free, his hands shaking so badly he could barely work the knife. You're okay, he kept saying over and over like a prayer. You're okay. You're safe. I've got you. Elena's arms came free. She wrapped them around his neck, buried her face in his shoulder, and let herself shake apart. I thought you were going to do it, she said against his throat. I thought you'd actually. Never. Never. He pulled back to frame her face with his hands. The gun wasn't loaded. I checked before I caught it. Nathaniel's mistake. He was so busy playing God, he didn't verify the weapon. Classic narcissistic error. So you knew that I had one chance to end this. To save you. To stop him. Damien kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her mouth. The FBI has been tracking my phone since you called. They were already en route when I got here. I just had to buy time until they arrived. You gambled everything. On you. On the belief that we were worth the risk. He helped her to her feet, kept his arms around her when she swayed. And we are. You are. God, Elena, if anything had happened to you. It didn't. She cupped his face. We're okay. We're safe. It's over. An FBI agent approached, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. Mr. Cross. Ms. Morgan. We'll need statements, but that can wait until you've been checked by paramedics. What about my father? Damien asked. Bail revoked. He'll be in federal custody until trial. And with the kidnapping, attempted murder, and violation of his bond conditions, he's not getting out again. The agent's smile was satisfied. He's done. Elena felt Damien's whole body relax against her, like puppet strings being cut. Thank you, Agent Reeves. And you're welcome. Though next time you're planning to play hero, Mr. Cross, maybe give us more than a 5-minute heads up. Damien's laugh was shaky but genuine. No promises. They spent 6 hours at the FBI field office, giving statements, reviewing evidence, answering questions. By the time they were released, it was well past midnight. Damien's driver met them outside. The town car felt like the safest place in the world. Leather seats, tinted windows, and the solid reassurance of distance between them and the nightmare they'd just survived. Elena sat pressed against Damien's side, his arm around her shoulders, neither speaking. There would be time later for words, for processing, for dealing with the trauma of almost dying. Right now they just needed to be together. The car pulled up in front of the brownstone in Brooklyn, not the penthouse. Elena looked at Damien questioningly. I sold it, he said quietly. The penthouse. Put it on the market 2 days ago. Damien. It was never ours. It was part of my father's empire. Built with his money, his connections, his blood. He helped her out of the car. I want something new. Something clean. Something we choose together. Elena understood. The penthouse was beautiful, but it was haunted. Better to start fresh. Inside the brownstone, Mia was waiting in the living room, having been called by Damien hours ago. She launched herself at Elena, nearly knocking her over. Don't you ever scare me like that again. I thought, when Damien called and said you'd been kidnapped. Mia was crying, her face buried in Elena's shoulder. I'm okay, me. Promise. I'm okay. They stood like that for a long moment, two sisters who'd survived too much already, holding each other in their childhood home. Finally, Mia pulled back, wiping her eyes. I'm staying here tonight. You're not sleeping alone after something like this. Actually, Damien said quietly, I was hoping Elena would come home with me. To a hotel. Somewhere neutral. Somewhere we can just breathe. Mia looked between them. You two are really back together, aren't you? Like for real this time? Yes, they said in unison. Mia smiled through her tears. Good. Because you're disgusting when you're apart. Like seriously mopey and tragic. She hugged Elena again. Go. Be together. But call me in the morning, or I'm showing up wherever you are with a SWAT team of my own. Deal, Elena promised. The hotel was 5-star anonymous. One of those boutique places in Soho where celebrities hid from paparazzi and billionaires conducted affairs. Damien had booked a suite with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city and a bathroom bigger than Elena's childhood bedroom. Shower first, Damien said, guiding her toward the bathroom. You've got warehouse grime in your hair. Elena looked down at herself. She was filthy, covered in dust and God knew what else from the warehouse floor. Only if you join me. Are you sure? After everything today. I'm sure. I need, she broke off throat tight. I need to know you're real. That we're really safe. That this isn't some dream before Victor puts a bullet in my head. Damien pulled her close. I'm real. We're safe. And I'm never letting you out of my sight again. They undressed slowly, carefully, cataloging bruises and scrapes. Elena had rope burns on her wrists, a bruise blooming on her shoulder where she'd hit the concrete. Damien had split knuckles from his fight with Victor and a cut above his eyebrow she didn't remember seeing before. Under the hot water, they washed away the day's violence. Damien was gentle, almost reverent, as he shampooed Elena's hair and soaped her skin. She did the same for him, mapping familiar territory with trembling hands. I love you, she said against his chest, water streaming over both of them. I love you so much it terrifies me. When that gun was pointed at my head, all I could think was that I'd never get to tell you again. You'll have 50 years to tell me. I see. However long we get. He tipped her face up. I'm not going anywhere, Elena. And neither are you. We survived my father. We survived his worst. Nothing can touch us now. She kissed him then, soft and lingering, tasting water and promise. When they finally left the shower, both wrinkled and warm, they fell into the massive bed in towels and exhaustion. "Sleep," Damien murmured, pulling her against his chest. "I'll keep watch. You need to sleep too." "I will. Eventually. When I stop seeing that gun at your head every time I close my eyes." His arms tightened. "Just let me hold you for a while. Let me know you're here. You're safe." Elena understood. She wouldn't sleep either, not for hours. Not until her nervous system stopped screaming danger with every shadow. So they lay there in the darkness, wrapped around each other, listening to the city outside and the steady rhythm of each other's breathing. "Marry me," Damien said into the silence. "Again. Next week. In the brownstone garden. Just us and Mia and maybe Marcus if he's not in prison." "Marcus helped the FBI. Agent Reeves told me when you were giving your statement. He'd been feeding them information for weeks, trying to make up for his betrayal." Elena traced patterns on Damien's chest. "I think he's trying to be better. Then he can come. If you want him there." "I do. He's your brother. And families are complicated." She pressed a kiss over his heart. "But yes, I'll marry you. Again. For real this time. No contracts, no coercion, just us choosing each other." "Just us choosing each other," Damien echoed. "I like the sound of that." They fell asleep like that, tangled together, the city glittering outside their window. Two people who'd started as stranger and captive, creditor and debtor, and became something infinitely more precious through fire and blood and desperate love. Tomorrow they would start planning a wedding. Real one. Tomorrow they would begin to heal. Tomorrow they would start their future. But tonight they simply held each other and were grateful to be alive. The wedding took place on a Saturday afternoon, 3 weeks after the warehouse. The brownstone's garden was small but perfect. Overgrown roses climbing the brick wall, a patch of green lawn, and fairy lights strung between the trees. Mia had helped with the decorating, transforming the neglected space into something magical. 20 people attended. Mia as maid of honor. Marcus as best man, looking haunted but determined. A handful of Elena's gallery colleagues. Damien's lawyer and security chief. Agent Reeves, who'd become an unexpected friend through the trial proceedings. No society reporters. No photographers. No cross-family empire representatives. Just the people who mattered. Elena wore her mother's vintage dress, the same one she'd worn to City Hall. But this time, she paired it with bare feet and wildflowers in her hair. This time, she walked down the makeshift aisle with joy instead of resignation. Damien waited under an arch of roses, wearing a simple navy suit with no tie. When he saw her, his whole face transformed, wonder and love and barely contained emotion. Mia officiated, having gotten ordained online specifically for this purpose. She kept the ceremony short and sweet, skipping most of the traditional language in favor of something more personal. "Elena and Damien," Mia said, her voice only shaking a little. "You've already been married once. But that was a business transaction. Contract. Today you're choosing each other. Freely. Completely. With full knowledge of each other's darkness and light." Elena and Damien faced each other, hands clasped, eyes locked. "Do you, Damien Cross, take Elena Morgan to be your wife? To love her in sickness and health, in wealth and poverty, through whatever chaos life throws at you?" "I do." Damien's voice was steady, certain. "I absolutely do." "And do you, Elena Morgan, take Damien Cross to be your husband? To love him with all his complications, his past, his baggage, and his unfortunate criminal family history?" Laughter rippled through the small gathering. Elena smiled through tears. "I do. Always." Then by the power vested in me by the state of New York and some website I found at 2 a.m., I pronounce you married. Again. For real this time. Mia grinned. "You may kiss each other like you mean it." Damien pulled Elena into his arms and kissed her deeply, thoroughly, putting everything he felt into the press of his mouth against hers. The gathering applauded, but Elena barely heard it. The whole world had narrowed to this. Damien's hands framing her face, his lips on hers, the absolute certainty that this was where she belonged. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard and smiling like idiots, Mia cleared her throat. Okay, that was gross and also adorable. Everyone move inside for food and drinking. My sister is officially off the market, and we're celebrating. The reception was loud and chaotic and perfect. Marcus gave a toast that was equal parts apology and blessing, his voice breaking when he spoke about second chances. Mia told embarrassing stories about Elena's teenage years. Agent Reeves regaled them with tales of Nathaniel's increasingly desperate attempts to manipulate his trial from federal custody. Elena and Damien sat at the center of it all, hands clasped under the table, barely eating because they couldn't stop looking at each other. Happy? Damien asked, his thumb stroking her knuckles. Deliriously. Elena leaned in to kiss his cheek. Though I could do without Marcus telling everyone about the time you got arrested for hacking into his high school's computer system. I was 16 and stupid. And technically, they never proved it was me. Because you were already brilliant at covering your tracks. She studied his face. The bruise from the warehouse had faded to yellow-green, but the cut above his eyebrow would probably leave a scar. No regrets. Only that I didn't burn that contract the day I met you. The words from the outline, but now infused with real meaning. Everything else, all the chaos, all the pain, was worth it to get here. Good answer. Elena kissed him properly this time, not caring that half the reception was watching. Now take me upstairs. I want to consummate this marriage. Damien's laugh was surprised and delighted. We're in your childhood home. With your sister downstairs. She'll understand. And I've wanted to desecrate my teenage bedroom with you since we started this whole mess. Elena stood, tugging his hand. Come on. Let's give the neighbors something to talk about. They made it halfway up the stairs before Mia's voice followed them. Keep it down up there. Some of us are trying to enjoy cake. More laughter. Then the sounds of the party faded as Elena pulled Damien into her room and locked the door. Mrs. Cross, Damien said, backing her toward the bed. Are you trying to seduce me? Mr. Cross, Elena replied, pulling him down on top of her. I believe that's exactly what I'm doing. They made love slowly, thoroughly, mapping each other's bodies like they were rediscovering something precious. This wasn't the desperate passion of the warehouse aftermath or the frantic need of their separation. This was celebration, promise, the physical expression of vows they'd just made. Afterward, they lay tangled in sheets that smelled like Elena's lavender detergent, listening to the party continue downstairs. Greece next week, Damien said, his fingers tracing idle patterns on her shoulder. 2 weeks of nothing but sun and sea and you in a bikini. Perfect. Elena pressed a kiss to his collarbone. And when we get back, we house hunt. Find something that's ours. Not connected to cross-family money or my father's empire. Something clean. Maybe something in Brooklyn. Close to Mia. Or Manhattan. Close to your gallery. Damien shifted to look at her. Whatever you want, Elena. Wherever you want. I'm just along for the ride now. Liar. You're a control freak who needs to micromanage every detail. But she was smiling. But I love you anyway. Flaws and all. Good. 'Cause you're stuck with me now. Legally, officially, irrevocably stuck. Best trap I ever walked into. They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other, the sounds of celebration filtering up through the floorboards. Tomorrow they'd start their honeymoon. Next month they'd start house hunting. Eventually they'd start thinking about the future. Children, maybe, or new business ventures, or simply building a life that had nothing to do with crime families and blood debts. But tonight they were just Elena and Damien. Husband and wife. Two people who'd chosen each other again and again, through every obstacle the universe threw at them. And they'd keep choosing each other every day for the rest of their lives. Plug. 1 year later. Elena stood in the gallery. Her gallery now, purchased with money from the Caravaggio Damien had gifted her, and surveyed the opening night crowd with satisfaction. The exhibition was a retrospective of emerging Brooklyn artists, and the turnout was spectacular. Damien appeared at her elbow with champagne, looking devastating in a charcoal suit. The Rothko just sold. For triple the asking price. That's the third piece tonight. Elena accepted the glass, clinked it against his. We're going to have to expand the gallery space. Already scouting locations. There's a warehouse in Red Hook that would be perfect. Lots of natural light, high ceilings. He slipped an arm around her waist. Though we might want to avoid warehouses, given our history. Elena laughed. Fair point. Though that particular warehouse is now a crime scene memorial, so probably not a great investment anyway. They stood together, watching the crowd circulate through the gallery. So much had changed in a year. Nathaniel was serving life without parole in a federal supermax. Victor had taken a plea deal and was somewhere in witness protection. Marcus had testified at the trial and was slowly rebuilding his relationship with Damien, one awkward coffee meeting at a time. And Elena and Damien had built something new, something theirs. The brownstone had been renovated into a home worthy of their future. Damien's venture capital firm had gone fully legitimate, cutting all ties to cross-family operations. Elena's gallery was thriving, her reputation growing. They were happy. Actually genuinely happy. Mrs. Vandermeer is looking at the Basquiat, Damien observed. Should I go work my charm? Please don't. You'll scare her with your intensity. Elena patted his chest. Let me handle the sales. You just stand here and look pretty. I can do that. He kissed her temple. Though I have news. Marcus called earlier. Oh. He's engaged. To that woman he's been seeing, the non-profit director. Says he's trying to be a better person, and apparently she's helping. Damien's voice was carefully neutral. He wants us to come to dinner. Meet her properly. Elena studied his face. How do you feel about that? Cautiously optimistic. He's not the brother I thought I knew. But maybe that's okay. Maybe we all get to reinvent ourselves. He squeezed her waist. What do you think? I think family is complicated. I think Marcus is trying. And I think we have enough love in our lives to give him another chance. She turned to face him fully. Plus, I have some news too. Oh! Elena took his hand, placed it low on her stomach. I'm pregnant. Damien went very still. You're about 8 weeks. Found out yesterday. Wanted to tell you somewhere special, but this seemed perfect. Surrounded by art and new beginnings and everything we've built together. We're having a baby. Damien's voice was wondering, odd. We're going to be parents. Terrifying, right? Absolutely terrifying. He kissed her soft and lingering. And perfect. You're perfect. This is perfect. How did I get this lucky? You married the right woman. Twice. Elena smiled against his mouth. Though fair warning, I'm going to be impossible to deal with when I'm pregnant. Mood swings, weird cravings, probably crying at commercials. I survived my father's criminal empire and a kidnapping. I can handle pregnancy hormones. Damien rested his forehead against hers. God, Elena. Baby. Our baby. Mia's going to be insufferable. She's been dropping hints about wanting to be an aunt for months. Elena laughed. And your child is going to be so spoiled. Between us and Mia and Marcus, if he's still around by then, this kid won't stand a chance. Good. They should be spoiled. Loved. Damien's hand spread protective over her still flat stomach. They should have everything we didn't. Safety. Stability. Parents who chose each other and chose them. They will, Elena promised. We'll make sure of it. They stood like that in the middle of the gallery, surrounded by art and possibility, the future spreading out before them like a canvas waiting to be painted. 1 year ago, Elena had been drowning in her father's debts, desperate and afraid. Damien had been cold and controlled, convinced he was irredeemable. Now they were building a life. Family. A future that had nothing to do with contracts or cages or the sins of the past. No regrets? Elena asked, echoing his question from their wedding day. Damien pulled her closer, his smile bright and genuine. Only that I didn't burn that contract the day I met you. But we got here anyway. Against all odds, through all the chaos, we got here. We did. Elena kissed him, not caring that they were in the middle of her gallery opening, that people were watching, that Mrs. Vandermeer was probably scandalized. And we're going to stay here. Together. Always. Always, Damien agreed. Outside, Brooklyn hummed with life. Inside, two people who'd found each other in the darkest circumstances celebrated the light they'd built together. The contract was void. The cage was broken. The debt was paid. And what remained was just love. Messy, complicated, hard-won love. The best kind there was. Indie.